Chapter 1140. On the bow of the ship. Not long after Yulan supported the old man and left, Night Spirit, who was initially silent, lowered his head slightly. His eyes flickered as though he had sensed something. "Brother, what princess is that Yulan?" Night Spirit sent a voice transmission to Su Zimo, with his spirit consciousness. There was indeed an array formation above the cabin that could isolate spirit consciousness and sound. Even Su Zimo could not hear the conversation between Yulan and Yulan inside. However, Night Spirit could hear it. "Yes," Su Zimo replied without the slightest bit of surprise. "Brother, you knew about it long ago?" Night Spirit asked in surprise. Su Zimo smiled gently and sent a voice transmission. "That Yulan is a princess while the two of them are princes. If I'm not wrong, the three of them should be from the Great Yu, Great Xia and Great Shang dynasties." Ah, Night Spirit was even more surprised. Su Zimo explained, "This spirit vessel is noble and elegant with treasures. If you observe carefully, you can see many characteristics of the royal family. Furthermore, the way the three of them move and sit is different from ordinary cultivators. Only those from the royal family have such characteristics." Night Spirit pondered for a moment and reacted. When he saw the three of them, he also felt that they were familiar. It turned out that the way the three of them moved was similar to Ji Yaoxue. They were all from the royal family. Also, Su Zimo continued, "This spirit vessel came from the territory of Great Zhou, and there are 3 Dharma Daojun on it. In the territory of Great Zhou, the only factions with 3 Dharma Daojun are the 3 dynasties." Before this, he was already puzzled. Normally speaking, the 3 dynasties should have Dharma Daojun presiding over them. However, after the destruction of the 3 dynasties, the 3 Dharma Daojun disappeared without a trace. Who would have thought that he would hide with the royal bloodline of the 3 dynasties? Now that he was heading to the North Region Dao Gathering, it seemed like he was up to something. The 3 great dynasties had been destroyed by the Great Zhou dynasty. From a certain perspective, the bloodline of these 3 great dynasties was a threat to Ji Yaoxue. "Big brother, do you want to?" Night Spirit's tone suddenly became a little eerie when he learned the identities of these people. "Let's wait and see what they plan to do." Su Zimo shook his head slightly. If these people cultivated peacefully from today onwards, and didn't interfere in the battles between the dynasties, then he didn't have to annihilate them. Su Zimo and Night Spirit were communicating with each other, using their divine senses. On the other side, the 2 princes were also communicating via divine sense. After some time, they exchanged a glance and revealed sinister smiles. "Miss, don't just stand there. Come and take a seat." The slightly plump man in the brocade robe squinted his eyes and greeted with a grin. His gaze unscrupulously sized up Nianqi. Nianqi merely glanced at him indifferently. She didn't say anything and remained motionless. This person was one of the princes of Great Shang, and had seen countless women. But compared to this young girl in front of him, those women were simply rouge and common powder. When he saw Nianqi's cold and handsome appearance, the Prince of Great Shang was not enraged. Instead, he felt an itch in his heart. Just now, he had already discussed with the Prince of Great Xia beside him on how to take down this girl. If it really didn't work, he would get the 2 imperial advisors to kill this green-robed cultivator. After all, the 2 imperial advisors were the Dharma Daojun, and were standing right behind them. When the Prince of Great Xia saw that Nianqi did not react, he chuckled and stood up. Reaching out, he grabbed Nianqi's wrist and said, "There's no need to be shy. Come and take a seat." Initially, Su Zimo was communicating with Night Spirit with his spirit consciousness. When he suddenly saw that action, his gaze shifted and landed on the Prince of Great Xia's extended arm. Instantly, his expression turned cold. Instantly, the temperature of the entire bow of the ship plummeted. The atmosphere seemed to have frozen. Initially, the 2 Dharma Daojun who were standing at the side merely frowned slightly when they saw that. However, all of a sudden, the 2 of them shuddered and gasped. "Pust!" The killing intent exuded by the green-robed cultivator caused both of them to shudder in fear. If that was the case for the Dharma Daojun, it was even worse for the princes of Great Shang and Great Xia, who were only at the nascent soul realm. Instantly, their bodies turned incomparably stiff, and their expressions froze as well. Their eyes were filled with bewilderment, and their hair stood on end. It was as though a calamity would befall them the next moment. Who was Su Zimo? How many people had he killed? Who had he killed? If he wanted to kill, even ordinary void reversions would not be able to withstand it, let alone Jining Jinjuan. It was even possible for cowardly people to be scared to death on the spot. It's best if you retract your claws. Su Zimo's gaze shifted to the Prince of Great Xia, and he said indifferently, unless you don't want them anymore. Su Zimo's tone was extremely calm, but it made people feel a chill coming from the bottom of their hearts. Almost without hesitation, as though it was an instinctive reaction to avoid danger, the Prince of Great Xia retracted his arm with a swoosh and retreated a few steps, hiding behind a Dharma Daojun. Clang! The Prince of Great Shang stood up hurriedly. In his panic, he bumped into a chair and let out a loud sound. His face was frightfully pale, and his legs went limp. He nearly fell to the ground and scrambled to hide behind another Dharma Daojun. Imperial Advisor. He wants to kill me. The Prince of Great Shang's voice trembled slightly with a shocked expression. When they saw how weak their prince was, the two Dharma Daojun could no longer be bothered to embarrass themselves. Both of them glared at Su Zimo with grim expressions. Fellow Taoist, what do you mean by this? One of the Dharma Daojun took a deep breath and composed himself once more as his gaze turned sharp. He was at the Dharma characteristic realm after all. The green-robed cultivator before them was only at the void reversion realm. Just now's palpitations might have been an illusion. What's wrong? Right then, not far away, the door of the cabin opened, and Yulan and the old man at the helm of just now walked out and asked loudly. Initially, Yulan was chatting with Uncle Zheng when she realized that something had happened at the bow of the ship and rushed over. Yulan, you came at the right time. The Prince of Great Xia mustered his courage and said, this Su fella has disobeyed his superiors and wants to kill us. Oh, Yulan's expression was unchanged as she asked instead, why does he want to kill you? Because the Prince of Great Xia was speechless. It was way too embarrassing to say that he harbored ill intentions towards someone else's maidservant. The Prince of Great Shang braced himself and said loudly, no matter what, it's a grave crime for him to have the intention to kill us. He deserves to die. Scram! Suddenly, Yulan hollered with a dark expression and said coldly, return to the cabin and stay there obediently. Don't come out and embarrass yourself. The Prince of Great Shang shrunk his neck from the scolding and did not dare to say anything. You! However, the Prince of Great Xia turned around with an indignant expression. Imperial Advisor Shi, the Dharma Daojun sighed. Go back. You guys should reflect on yourselves. When they heard that, the two princes' hearts turned cold. They could only grit their teeth and swallow their anger before turning to leave. Chapter 1141. The two princes were filled with resentment. However, they did not know that if Yulan had not asked them to leave, they would have been two corpses by now. If the two imperial advisors wanted to protect them, then the two imperial advisors would have to die with them. Brother Su, I'm sorry. Yulan revealed an apologetic expression and bowed to Su Zimo, saying sincerely, no matter how they offended you just now, I'm here to apologize to you. As a princess of a dynasty, Su Zimo did not expect Yulan to make such an action. They were only acquaintances who had met by chance. To think that Yulan would stand on his side and offend the two princes. Initially, he had intended to make use of this matter to go on a killing spree. However, Yulan's actions made it difficult for him to make a move. Su Zimo nodded and did not say anything else. The two imperial advisors of Great Xia and Great Shang exchanged glances and lamented internally. Although they were of the royal bloodline as well, compared to Princess Yulan, the princes of their dynasties were nothing more than a pile of mud. Despite the destruction of their dynasties, the Princess of Great Yu was thinking of ways to befriend the various major sects and factions, befriending paragons and plotting to revive her dynasty. However, their princes were focused on women. If everything went smoothly at the North Region Dao Meet, and they succeeded in reviving their dynasty, the two imperial advisors had already decided to follow Princess Yulan. In their eyes, even though they were both women, Princess Yulan was not weaker than the current Empress of Great Zhou. The reason why the Empress of Great Zhou was able to achieve her current accomplishments was all because of Dao being Araki Takeshi. Uncle Zheng continued to control the spirit vessel and drove forward. Yulan sat back down and pondered for a moment before saying, "To be honest, I'm the princess of the Great Yu dynasty. Those two are the princes of Great Xia and Great Shang respectively." After saying that, Yulan paused for a moment and looked into Su Zimo's eyes. The two imperial advisors standing behind her felt their hearts tighten, as well as they glared at Su Zimo, wanting to see how the latter would react. Unfortunately, they were disappointed. Su Zimo's expression was calm, and his eyes were deep, without the slightest ripple. It was as though the titles of princes and princesses were no different from ordinary people in the eyes of this green-robed cultivator. How could this be? Could it be that this green-robed cultivator had not even heard of the 4 dynasties of the North region? The two imperial advisors muttered in their hearts. Right then, Su Zimo said indifferently, "As far as I know, the Great Shang, Great Xia and Great Yu dynasties have already been destroyed." When Yulan saw that Su Zimo did not reveal any hostility, she was already relieved. Yes. She smiled bitterly and sighed. It's also a coincidence. The decline of the nation's fate is the will of the heavens. Pausing for a moment, Yulan's gaze became determined again as she said, "However, I'm indignant. I'm not willing to lose to the Emperor of Great Zhou. I want to restore my country." "Restore the country?" Su Zimo raised his brow slightly. Yulan nodded heavily. "The reason why the Great Zhou dynasty is in its current state is not because of how strong it is. It's because of many factors that led to a freak combination of factors." This sentence was not wrong. The reason why the Great Zhou dynasty was able to unify so smoothly was mainly because of the calamity of the Witch Gu. This calamity caused the 3 dynasties to collapse without a fight and fall apart. Yulan continued, "I believe that I'm not inferior to the Emperor of Great Zhou. The Emperor of Great Zhou is merely relying on a single Dao being, Araki Takeshi." When he heard that, a strange look flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Although Araki Takeshi was famous in the current cultivation world, not many people had seen his appearance. Yulan did not know that the person sitting in front of her was Dao being, Araki Takeshi. Yulan did not notice the strange look in Su Zimo's eyes and continued, "To be honest, fellow Daoist, the reason why I'm heading to the North Region Dao meet is to find a paragon who can suppress Araki Takeshi." "You want to suppress Araki Takeshi?" "Heh." Su Zimo laughed and shook his head slightly. Thinking that Su Zimo did not believe her, Yulan said hurriedly, "Brother Su, Dao being, Araki Takeshi's body was crippled by a half-martial ancestor, and he lost the divine phoenix bone, creation Qinglian and other utmost treasures. His combat strength is far inferior to before. Furthermore, there are many paragons and monster incarnates in this generation. It's not as if there aren't people who can fight against Araki Takeshi." "Oh, tell me about it," Su Zimo asked. Yulan said, "I heard that one of the 4 gentry cultivation clans, the Yuan clan, produced a monster incarnate. His Dao title is Wushuang, and he's the #1 Dao being of the North region. The reason why I'm heading to the North region Dao meet is because I hope to get that person's help. If Dao being Wushuang can take action and suppress Araki Takeshi with the power of the Yuan clan to fight against Misty Peak, Great Yu will definitely be able to revive our dynasty." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat, and he realized that Dao being Wushuang should be Yuan Wushuang. A look of hatred flashed through the golden lion's eyes when it heard Dao being Wushuang's name. However, no one noticed that he was sprawled at the side. Su Zimo asked again, "Do you have a deep relationship with Dao being Wushuang?" "Not really." Yulan shook her head and sighed softly. "Although we're both at the Void Reversion realm, how could I have the chance to come into contact with Dao being Wushuang given his status? We've just never met before." "Then why would he help you?" Su Zimo asked. When she heard that question, Yulan suddenly fell silent. The atmosphere at the banquet became a little awkward. "Forget it. Pretend I didn't ask." Su Zimo waved it off casually. To be fair, Su Zimo was not curious as to what methods Yulan used to get Yuan Wushuang's help. Just now he was merely asking casually, Yulan took a deep breath of air and suddenly raised her head. I heard that Dao being Wushuang likes beautiful women. Pausing for a moment, Yulan blushed and grit her teeth. I believe that I'm not bad looking, and I'm also at the void reversion realm. Furthermore, I was once the princess of Great Yu. I believe that he'll definitely be interested. Su Zimo was stunned. He had not expected Yulan to have such plans. Is it worth it? Su Zimo asked instead. As long as Great Yu can be reborn, sacrificing my body is nothing. Yulan's tone was firm. However, right after, her eyes dimmed and she smiled bitterly. I'm sure you must despise me in your heart, right? That's right. I deserve to be looked down upon by others for belittling myself like this. These were the most secretive things, and also the most embarrassing things. For some reason, Yulan had told him about them. You don't have to say that. Su Zimo shook his head. Yulan sniffed and forced a smile. I've been keeping these things in my heart for a long time, and it feels much better to say them out loud. For some reason, I just feel that you're trustworthy. Pausing for a moment, Yulan winked at Su Zimo. A woman's sixth sense is very accurate. Standing behind Su Zimo, Nian Shi could not help but roll his eyes cutely and call her an idiot internally. She wished she could say it out loud. What bullsh asterisk T sixth sense. This handsome person before her was Dao being Araki Takashi, whom she wanted to suppress. Night Spirit's gaze turned strange. When Su Zimo saw how honest the other party was, he could not continue pretending inside. Actually, my name is Su Zimo. Chapter 1142. Ah, Yulan exclaimed softly with a delighted expression. Brother Su, you finally let down your guard and told me your true name? Su Zimo was stunned. Yulan's reaction was completely out of his expectations. Instinctively, he looked at the three Dharma Daojun. The three Dharma Daojun did not react when they heard Su Zimo's name. Araki Takashi established the Dao and imparted martial arts to all living beings. Everyone in the world knew of Araki Takashi's name. Apart from some old friends, not many people in the cultivation world knew that Araki Takashi's name was Su Zimo. It was just like how everyone in the world knew of Shura's name, but did not know that Shura's name was Yen Beichen. There were many void reversions that died in the hands of Su Zimo, such as some titular disciples, but even Su Zimo did not know their names. For paragons and monster incarnates like them, their Dao names were their symbol. Generally speaking, when they befriended other fellow Daoists, they would only say their Dao names. A name like Su Zimo was more like a mark in the mortal world. Su Zimo was stunned for a moment before he reacted quickly and felt relieved. That was normal. Although he was bent on killing Xuanyu Daoren, he did not know what Xuanyu Doran's name was. It was enough for him to know that his Dao name was Xianyu, and that he was from Glass Palace. Who cared what his name was? Initially, Su Zimo wanted to remind Yulan. He was even prepared for a huge battle. However, he did not expect Yulan to misunderstand him, even though she had never heard of his name before. She thought that Su Zimo had finally let down his guard and said his name. Brother Su, I want to revive my dynasty. Are you willing to help me? Yulan took a deep breath and looked at Su Zimo without blinking, asking softly with anticipation. Su Zimo shook his head. Yulan's eyes dimmed. I know that this request is a little abrupt, but... Before Yulan could finish speaking, she saw Su Zimo wave his hand and interrupt her. Su Zimo's expression was calm as he said bluntly, Don't even think about reviving your country in the future. It's impossible. Yulan frowned slightly, feeling a little angry. Restoring her country was her dream. She didn't want to admit defeat. She did not think that she would lose. As long as she could obtain Daoist Wushuang's help and suppress Daoist Araki Takashi, she would definitely be able to rebuild the Great Yu, fight against the Great Zhou, and divide the northern region. Earlier, she had found this person pleasing to the eye. But now, she suddenly realized that this green-robed cultivator was a little annoying. Even if Brother Su doesn't intend to help, there's no need to attack me like this, right? Yulan tried her best to control her emotions and said in a deep voice, If I can obtain the support of some aristocratic families during this trip to the North Region Dao meet, not only can I revive my country, I can even overthrow the rule of the Great Zhou dynasty. Impossible. Su Zimo shook his head and smiled, saying word by word. As long as Araki Takashi is alive, you'll never be able to revive your country or overthrow the Great Zhou dynasty. Everything depends on effort. Yulan's tone turned unyielding as well. This time round, I intend to ask Taoist Wuxia for help. If he's willing to help, Araki Takashi will be nothing. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo reared his head in laughter. What are you laughing at? Yulan asked coldly. Su Zimo pursed his lips. Is Taoist Wuxia that powerful? In this generation, there are many paragons and monster incarnates. The entire Tianhuang mainland is welcoming a golden era. Araki Takashi isn't invincible either. Someone will definitely surpass him and trample on him. Yulan was furious, and her expression turned cold. In her opinion, she could understand why Su Zimo did not want to help. However, this person was way too detestable and spared no effort to attack her. She could not accept that. At that moment, Yulan had yet to realize that Su Zimo was not attacking her. Instead, he was reminding her or telling her to back off. The two of them did not get along. If they continued, they would only quarrel. Although the two Dharma Daojun standing behind Yulan did not say anything, they looked at Su Zimo coldly. Just now, they did not say anything when Su Zimo threatened their prince. After all, their prince was the one who was unreasonable first. Now that this green-robed cultivator did not know his place, and was arguing with Princess Yulan, the two Dharma Daojun were filled with killing intent. As long as Yulan gave the order or a look, the two of them would attack decisively. Yulan stood up, intending to leave. The two Dharma Daojun even asked with their eyes if they should attack the green-robed cultivator. Yulan shook her head gently. Although she was a little angry, she was not at the point where she wanted to kill for no reason. Furthermore, she and Su Zimo merely had different thoughts and views. Just now, the two of them were still chatting happily. There was no need for them to turn hostile and kill each other. Yulan turned back to look at Su Zimo. The green-robed cultivator was still sipping his tea casually, as though he did not realize that just now, he was nearly killed because of his words. This person has no shrewdness at all. Could I have misjudged him? Yulan sighed internally and turned to leave. Su Zimo, who was seated at the table, was expressionless, but he was sighing internally as well. If Yulan had not stopped the two Dharma Daojun from attacking, the two imperial advisors would have been reduced to corpses by now. Yulan thought that she had saved Su Zimo's life by stopping the two Dharma Daojun from attacking because of her benevolence. However, she did not know that her benevolence had saved herself. For the next few days, Yulan spent most of her time in the cabin. She would only come out occasionally to talk to Su Zimo. However, after the previous argument, there was clearly more animosity between the two of them. Although Yulan did not chase away Su Zimo and the others, she was no longer as enthusiastic as she was when they first met. On the other hand, the two princes were much friendlier towards Su Zimo. Each time, they would accompany him with smiles, as though they had completely forgotten about their previous unhappiness. About 10 days later, the outline of a city gradually appeared on the horizon ahead. As they approached, the city became clearer. The city walls stretched for thousands of kilometers and could not be seen at a glance. The gigantic black bricks were carved with the marks of time. What was the concept of thousands of kilometers? Cultivators who had just entered the void reversion realm could only extend their spirit consciousnesses to a range of 50 kilometers. Only the Dharma Daojuan spirit consciousnesses could cover a range of 500 kilometers. Just by looking at the outline of the ancient city, one could tell that it was majestic and even more spectacular than the capital of the Great Zhou dynasty. It was like an ancient behemoth sprawled on the ground. Qianheaven City. It had a long history that could be traced back to the ancient era. All these years, the North Region Dao meet would be held in this ancient city every time. Su Zimo's group arrived before the city. Although their spirit vessel was huge, it was as tiny as a grain of sand in front of the ancient city. We're finally here. Yulan stood in front of the spirit vessel and looked at the tall ancient city before her, murmuring softly. Her expression was complicated as a hint of anticipation, struggle, helplessness and shame flashed through her eyes. If you regret it, It's not too late to return now. Su Zimo could sense the change in Yulan's emotions and said indifferently. Yulan remained silent. In the end, her gaze gradually turned resolute. As long as she could restore her dynasty, she would not regret any sacrifice. Since I've come this far, I have no way out. Yulan gripped her fists tightly and said resolutely. Chapter 1143. When Su Zimo and the others arrived at Qian Heaven City, they could see many cultivators descending from outside the city and walking towards the city gates. On both sides of the city gates, there were many armored soldiers guarding. Those soldiers were not to be trifled with either. With a sweep of his spirit consciousness, he could sense that most of them were void reversions. On the city walls, there were 4 gigantic mirrors that shone with 4 beams of light that enveloped the city gates. Demon Revealing Mirror. The North Region Dao Meet was a grand event for the cultivators of the North Region, and no accidents were allowed to happen. With the existence of the Demon Revealing Mirror, they could capture fiend demons that had taken human form and were hiding among the cultivators. On the city walls, the cultivator guarding the Demon Revealing Mirror wore Taoist robes and emitted a powerful aura. He swept his sharp gaze across the cultivators entering the city. That cultivator was a commander of Qian Heaven City and was also a Dharma Daojun. The 4 city gates of Qian Heaven City were guarded by Dharma characteristic commanders. The void reversion soldiers were extremely strict in inspecting the cultivators that came and went. Let's enter the city as well, Yulan said and dispelled the spirit vessel, landing on the ground and heading towards the city gates. The presence of 3 Dharma Daojun in their group attracted the attention of the Dharma characteristic commander on the city walls. Who are you? At the city gates, 2 void reversion soldiers crossed their halberds and collided, causing sparks to fly as they blocked Su Zimo and the others. I'm Yulan from the Great Yu dynasty. Yulan had a calm expression as she pointed to the 2 princes beside her. These 2 are the princes of Great Xia and Great Shang. Great Yu, Great Xia and Great Shang? The soldier guarding the city sneered. The 3 dynasties are already destroyed. What *T princes are they? When they heard that, the faces of the 2 princes flushed red. However, the 2 of them had timid expressions and did not dare to make a sound. Although they were just 2 guards, they were from a major cultivation aristocratic family. Even before their country was destroyed, they might not have dared to offend these people, let alone the fact that their country was already destroyed. TSK. The other guard sized up Yulan without any restraint and said with a burning gaze. Fellow Taoist Yulan, I believe you have nowhere to go now that your dynasty has been destroyed. Why don't you come to my place? We can become Tao companions and study the Tao of dual cultivation. As the princess of the Great Yu dynasty, Yulan was extremely beautiful to begin with. She even had the noble aura of royalty and was extremely attractive to most cultivators. Oh, Yulan's expression did not change as she said indifferently, if you want to dual cultivate with me, you'll have to ask if Tao being Wushuang agrees to it. Hearing the name of Taoist Wushuang, the guard's expression changed and his eyes were filled with deep fear. In fact, Yulan had never seen Yuan Wushuang at all, nor did she have any friendship with him. Her words were also ambiguous. However, when others heard it, they would subconsciously think that she was close to Tao being Wushuang. Fellow Taoist Yulan, I'm sorry. I was rude. The guard lowered his head slightly and bowed hurriedly in apology. Yulan nodded and headed into the city with the 2 princes and the 3 Dharma Daojun. Su Zimo's group of 4 followed behind them. Su Zimo's gaze swept past the demon revealing mirror on the city wall casually as he sent a voice transmission to Night Spirit. Can you hide it? Don't worry. Night Spirit's expression was indifferent. The fact that the golden lion was in its true form meant that it was the mount or spirit pet of a cultivator and could enter the city. However, Su Zimo's Qinglian true body did not have any demon bloodline. Nianqi was a Protoss and not a demon. The only thing that could be exposed was Night Spirit. The 4 of them walked to the area covered by the demon revealing mirror and headed into the city without stopping. When the power of the demon revealing mirror landed on Night Spirit, it was as though it had entered a black hole and could not detect any aura at all. There was no reaction from the demon-revealing mirror. Right then, the commander guarding the city wall frowned and looked at Su Zimo's group. Earlier on, he suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. However, on second thought, he did not notice anything amiss. The commander shook his head and continued to check on the others. Compared to the stifling atmosphere at the city gate, Qian Heaven City was extremely lively. Cultivators could be seen flying in midair. There were also cultivators riding on spirit beasts that flew over everyone's heads. There were many ancient buildings in the ancient city. There were many cultivators gathered on both sides of the long streets. Some cultivators sat on the ground with items that shone with spirit light in front of them. The North Region Dao meet would only begin in a few days. Qian Heaven City was a rare trading market. Some cultivators remained silent and waited for others to come forward, so that they could discuss the price with their spirit consciousnesses in a secretive manner. As for some cultivators, they were hawking loudly, wanting to attract more cultivators so that their treasures could be sold for a higher price. The two princes walked side by side. There were spirit consciousnesses between the two of them, and it was unknown what they were secretly chatting about. Yulan frowned slightly and pondered for a moment before stopping in her tracks. I'm sure everyone is tired from the journey. Let's find a place to rest first. Pausing for a moment, Yulan turned to look at Su Zimo. Since we've already arrived at Qian Heaven City, let's part ways here. Take care, Brother Su. Yulan's tone was slightly heavier when she said take care. She looked at Su Zimo with a hint of reminder. However, Su Zimo was distracted and did not seem to notice. Don't. The two princes hurried over enthusiastically and said with a smile, we hit it off with Brother Su. Since we've already arrived at Qian Heaven City, why are we in a hurry to part? Let's rest for the night and explore the trading market tomorrow. Sure. Perhaps moved by the enthusiasm of the two princes, Su Zimo agreed with a smile. Yulan frowned and sighed internally. This Su Zimo was truly simple-minded. Up until now, he had not realized that he was in extreme danger. Over the past few days, the two princes had been fawning over Su Zimo and were very enthusiastic on the surface. However, Yulan knew very well that the two princes were born in the royal family and were pampered. They were vengeful people. There was no way they would let Su Zimo off after being threatened. It was abnormal for the two of them to have such a drastic change in attitude towards Su Zimo. Any cultivator with some intelligence would be able to tell that something was amiss. However, Su Zimo's group was not the only one who did not notice it. The other three were like idiots as well. The black-robed man had a cold expression and was indifferent to everything. The lame golden lion could not understand the schemes of the human race. Although the maidservant was extremely beautiful, she was only a vase. As the princess of the Great Yu dynasty, there were some things that she could not say too clearly. However, she could not bear it and wanted to remind Su Zimo. Princess, forget it. Right then, Uncle Zheng's voice sounded in her mind. You've already done your best. If that lad follows us tonight, this is his fate. Sigh. Looking at Su Zimo, who was traveling with the two princes and was oblivious to the danger, Yulan had a helpless expression and could only sigh softly. Chapter 1144. Yulan, Su Zimo, and the others found an inn nearby as a temporary place to stay. In this Qiantian city, inns like this could be found everywhere. Their group asked for a total of 3 rooms. Yulan and Uncle Zheng were alone. The two princes of Great Shang and Great Xia, as well as their imperial advisors. Su Zimo and the other 3 were alone. Rest early, Brother Su. Let's tour Qian Heaven City together tomorrow and see if we can find any treasures. The Prince of Great Shang was very enthusiastic as he greeted Su Zimo and bade farewell. Sure, Su Zimo replied casually. The two princes turned to leave and exchanged glances with a smug look in their eyes. Upon returning to their rooms, the two imperial advisors set up a dermic power barrier that isolated the sound of spirit consciousness right away. Princes, are you sure you want to do that? One of the imperial advisors asked in a deep voice. Of course, the Prince of Great Xia said coldly with a dark expression. You were present when that person wanted to kill me previously. As the saying goes, Those who strike first gain the advantage, and those who strike later suffer. That's right. The Prince of Great Shang nodded as well. Since that person is an itinerant cultivator without any shrewdness or background, so be it if he's killed. Pausing for a moment, he seemed to have thought of something, and licked his lips. Right, don't hurt that yellow-haired girl. The two imperial advisors exchanged glances without saying anything. There were some things that both of them were well aware of. The true reason why the two princes wanted to kill was because they wanted to monopolize the golden-haired girl. After all, the two princes had done too many such things when the Great Shang and Great Xia dynasties were still around. The two imperial advisors were disdainful towards such matters. However, they did not refuse. After all, they did not like Su Zimo either. With their cultivation base and combat strength, it would be a piece of cake for them to kill 2 or 3 void reversions in this inn. On the other side, Yulan looked at Su Zimo's departing back view, and could not bear it. No matter what, she was the one who invited that person over. If not for this person might not have had a grudge with the two princes. If this person were to die here, she would feel somewhat apologetic. At that thought, Yulan slowed down. After seeing the two princes leave, she whispered to Uncle Zheng. Uncle Zheng, head back first. I'll be right back. With that said, Yulan followed behind Su Zimo and entered his room. What's up? Su Zimo raised his eyebrows and asked. Yulan closed the door hurriedly and waved her sleeves, setting up a dermic power barrier. She whispered, Brother Su, if I were you, I would leave this inn immediately. Oh, Su Zimo asked curiously, why is that? Yulan frowned slightly and asked with a grim tone. Brother Su, do you really think that you'll have a chance to see the sun tomorrow after resting here for a night? Su Zimo's expression changed, and his voice became low. He asked mysteriously, why? Will it rain tomorrow? Nian Qi couldn't help but burst out laughing. Yulan's face darkened, and her lungs were about to explode. Rain. Rain my ass. Yulan almost couldn't help but curse. That person was truly stupid to the extreme. She had already warned him to this extent, but that person did not notice at all. Yulan was infuriated. She had truly misjudged this time round to think that this person was not simple. The golden lion sprawled at the side, and could not help but grin as well. It had been a long time since that smile appeared on his face. Suddenly, he felt as though he had returned to the days when the 7 of them were invincible in the ancient battlefield and bickered and laughed. How delightful! At that moment, the depression in the golden lion's heart lessened significantly. Yulan took a few deep breaths in succession, and her towering chest heaved up and down. She tried her best to compose herself and grit her teeth. Brother Su, you're about to face a calamity. After pausing for a moment, Yulan no longer concealed and said directly, someone wants to kill you. Hurry and run. Initially, she thought that Su Zimo would be shocked. Unexpectedly, Su Zimo shrugged and waved it off with a calm expression, saying casually, It's fine, my life is tough. Generally speaking, those who want to kill me will die tragically. He wasn't just making things up. For more than 100 years, there were countless experts who wanted to kill him, but most of them had already perished. Except, his words were simply laughable to the extreme in Yulan's ears. Just how arrogant and conceited was this person? How could he be so confident and say such words when he didn't even know who his opponent was? If he knew that the people who wanted to kill him were 2 Dharma Daojun, he would probably be scared out of his wits, right? You're on your own now, disappointed. Yulan no longer tried to persuade him, and merely said coldly before turning to leave. See you tomorrow, Su Zimo said with a grin. Yulan paused in her tracks and shuddered in anger. Gritting her teeth, she said, I hope so. After Yulan left and Su Zimo closed the door, he retracted his smile and murmured softly, Seems like I'm going to be restless tonight. When Yulan returned to her room, she was still angry. Forget it. Uncle Zheng smiled indifferently. Princess, there's no need to be angry over someone who's about to die. You're benevolent, and have already reminded him. You can't be blamed for this. I am just... Yulan could not explain why, but she felt indignant. Her first impression of Su Zimo when she saw him was that he was not simple. That was the reason why she invited him warmly, and even revealed her background and plans to befriend him. She believed in her first instinct. However, after interacting with him for the past few days, she realized that there was something mysterious about this person. He was hazy and could not be seen clearly or guessed. At times he was silent and his deep eyes seemed to contain a sea of stars. Occasionally, he would exude an aura. It was domineering and dignified, looking down on everything. That ethereal aura seemed to be able to devour mountains and rivers, and accommodate the vast firmaments. However, at times, this person seemed unsophisticated, and did not know when to advance or retreat. In fact, he did not even notice the scheming of cultivators. Let's not think about him anymore. Yulan shook her head. After a long time, she had no idea, and her head was dizzy from thinking about it. She tried her best to calm her mind and lay on the bed, keeping her mind clear so that she could calm down and recuperate. As time passed by, the night deepened. The entire Qian Heaven City was much quieter than it was during the day. In this dark night, in an inconspicuous inn, there was a trace of ghastly and bone-piercing killing intent pervading the air. Two figures floated out of a room silently. They were the imperial advisors of the Great Xia and Great Shang dynasties. The two of them exchanged glances and nodded. In a flash, they floated towards Su Zimo's room not far away like two ghosts. Chapter 1145. Standing at the door, the two Dharma Daojun listened attentively. At this distance, the two of them could clearly hear the breathing in the room. There were a total of 4 of them. Every single breath was even and calm. It was clear that the 4 void reversions in the room did not notice their movements at all. The two of them smirked smugly. Given their cultivation, it was way too easy for them to hide from the senses of void reversions. Their spirit consciousnesses moved and enveloped the room slowly, forming a gigantic spirit consciousness barrier that could isolate sound. Even though it was easy for them to kill a void reversion with their methods, it was still extremely easy. However, this was Qian Heaven City after all, and it was best if they did not alarm anyone. That way, they could do it cleanly and not attract any unforeseen events. After the spirit consciousness barrier was formed, the two of them no longer concealed their tracks. They pushed open the door and entered, closing it behind them. The room was not big, and could be seen with a single glance. There was a bed in the innermost area, and the green-robed cultivator was lying inside. His back was facing the two imperial advisors, and he was still asleep. Beside the bed, the golden-haired girl sat on the ground with her eyes closed, as though she was cultivating. In another corner, a golden lion was crouching there. It seemed to have heard the commotion, but it only twitched its ears, and did not turn its head to look over. The two imperial advisors were stunned for a moment before sneering. They did not conceal the sound of their doors opening and closing. Under such circumstances, the people in the room were not vigilant at all. These people deserved to die. They truly did not know how the 4 of them managed to cultivate to the void reversion realm, and survive until now given their vigilance. However, the two imperial advisors frowned before long. There seemed to be something wrong with the room. It was as though the two of them had overlooked something extremely important. All of a sudden, almost at the same time, a light flashed through their minds. There was one less person in the room. Just before they entered the room, there were 4 more breathing sounds. However, after they entered the room, there was one less breathing sound. That was because their gazes were attracted by Su Zimo, Nian Qi, and the golden lion immediately. That was the reason why they did not notice it immediately. The person who disappeared might still be in this room. So much so that they were unable to sense it. Although the two imperial advisors were in the transcendence realm, at this moment, they felt their scalps tingle and their hair stand on end. It was as if they had been targeted by an extremely terrifying existence. A blurry figure was hidden in the darkness above their heads. This figure was extremely close to the two of them, almost within reach. However, the two imperial advisors did not notice it at all. Not good. The two imperial advisors felt like their hearts were about to explode. They immediately wanted to unleash their magic power and leave this place. Unfortunately, it was all too late. The moment they stepped into this room, they were already 2 dead men. In the darkness, the night spirit was like a hunting god of death. His eyes were cold and emotionless. Suddenly, a purple gold tail appeared behind him. On the tailbone, a cold light was flashing like a sharp spike, piercing into the back of the head of an imperial preceptor in an instant, and coming out from between his eyebrows. The night spirit's tail pierced through the head of an imperial advisor. Before that person could say anything, his essence spirit was destroyed on the spot. Just as the night spirit extended his tail, he extended his palm and stabbed down at the head of the other imperial advisor. Exclamation point. There was almost no obstruction. The Dharma Daojuan's tough skull was like tofu against the night spirit's claws. 5 bloody holes appeared on the head of the imperial advisor. Before he could even react, his soul core had already been crushed into pieces, and he perished. If it was a head-on fight, the 2 Dharma Daojun might not be so useless. However, Night Spirit hid in the dark and struck first. Before the 2 imperial advisors could see how the Night Spirit attacked, they died tragically on the spot. Night Spirit's expression was calm, as though he had done something insignificant. He stood at the door and listened for a while. After sensing for a while, he hugged the 2 corpses and left the room in a flash. In the darkness of the night, his figure was almost indiscernible, like a ghost. In the blink of an eye, he had already snuck into the room of the 2 princes. The room was slightly bigger, and there were 2 huge beds. The 2 princes were sleeping soundly on the bed. Even in their dreams, there was a hint of lust on their faces, and saliva dripped from the corners of their mouths. They had a plan long ago. If nothing went wrong, the annoying green-robed cultivator, the cold black-robed man, and the lame golden lion would be killed by the 2 imperial advisors. The golden-haired girl was the only one left. The next morning, when the golden-haired girl saw that everyone around her had died tragically, she would suffer a huge blow and might break down mentally. At that moment, 2 people would appear in time to comfort the golden-haired girl and make love to her. With that fantasy in mind, the 2 of them were already having beautiful dreams. They did not know that a black-robed man was hugging 2 corpses beside their bed and looking at them coldly. Night Spirit flicked 2 dermic arts from his fingertips and landed on the 2 princes, causing them to sleep even more soundly. Thereafter, Night Spirit placed the corpse of the imperial advisor of Great Xia gently on the bed of the Prince of Great Xia. The corpse lay beside the Prince of Great Xia with its body turned sideways, and a pair of protruding eyes met the lewd face of the Prince of Great Xia. It was an extremely strange scene. In his deep sleep, the Prince of Great Xia was having a beautiful dream, and would even smack his lips from time to time. However, in front of him, there was a corpse that was still warm. Blood was still flowing from its head, dyeing the bed red. It was hard to imagine what it would be like when the Prince of Great Xia woke up and saw this. Night Spirit turned around and came to the other bed. He placed the body of the imperial advisor of Great Shang on it, and did the same. The imperial advisor glared at the Prince of Great Shang with his dead fish eyes. The 2 princes did not realize that their nightmare had just begun. After doing that, Night Spirit smirked and left the room in a flash. The entire process was silent, and did not attract anyone's attention. On the other side, in Yulan's room, Yulan tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. A moment later, Uncle Zheng's voice sounded. "Princess, sleep. That person should be dead." When she heard that, Yulan's body shuddered and she sighed helplessly. Actually, Uncle Zheng was also paying attention to the commotion outside. The 2 imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia moved and left the room. They arrived outside Su Zimo's room and set up a spirit consciousness barrier. None of those actions could escape Uncle Zheng's senses. Not long after the 2 imperial advisors entered the room, the spirit consciousness barrier disappeared. Furthermore, the 2 of them did not come out again. This meant that the 2 of them had already killed everyone in the room cleanly before dispersing the spirit consciousness barrier. Uncle Zheng no longer paid attention to the room. At that moment, he did not realize that right under his nose, Night Spirit had left the room silently and moved the 2 corpses back. Chapter 1146. The next day, Yulan sat up at the first glimmer of dawn. Her eyes were slightly red and bloodshot. Last night, when she heard the news of Su Zimo and the others dying, not only was she unable to fall asleep, her heart was even more chaotic, and she was no longer sleepy. Yulan sat by the bed and stared at a corner in deep thought. Uncle Zheng, who was sitting quietly at the side, opened his eyes slowly and consoled softly. Princess, you're not to be blamed for this. You don't have to feel guilty at all. There are some things that you'll be able to accept once you're older. Yes, Yulan took a deep breath and nodded. Uncle Zheng, I know. Right now, the most important thing for me is to revive my dynasty. Her gaze turned resolute once more. Nothing and no one can stop me from rebuilding Great Yu. I'm relieved that you have that belief. Uncle Zheng nodded with a smile. Princess, I have good news for you. If nothing goes wrong, the two imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia will assist you as well. Really? Yulan's eyes lit up. If she could obtain the help of the two Dharma Daojun, her hopes of rebuilding Great Yu would increase. Uncle Zheng nodded. Those two princes have no ambitions and are useless. The two of them unintentionally revealed their intentions to follow you, Princess. As long as you nod your head, I'll lobby for you today and win the two of them over completely. All right. Yulan bowed deeply to Uncle Zheng and said sincerely, I'll have to trouble you then, Uncle Zheng. You'll forever be the imperial advisor of Great Yu and my teacher. Let's go. You haven't slept the entire night. Let's go out for a breather. Uncle Zheng stood up and said. Yulan nodded and pushed open the door. A fresh wave of spirit qi surged over, and she was invigorated. Instinctively, Yulan's gaze shifted to a room not far away. That room should have been occupied by a cultivator with delicate features. But now he was probably a cold corpse. Right then, the door was pushed open with a creak. A familiar figure walked out from inside. He was dressed in a green robe and had sleepy eyes. He stood at the door with his hands raised high and stretched lazily. Yulan's petite mouth gradually widened in shock as she stared at the figure without blinking, rooted to the spot. As if sensing Yulan's gaze, Su Zimo turned his head and looked at her. He greeted her with a smile. Good morning. Ah! Yulan exclaimed softly with a flustered expression. Instinctively she replied. Morning. Yu, how did you? Yulan blinked but did not know how to ask. Although she had countless questions when she saw that Su Zimo was still alive, in the depths of her heart, she let out a long sigh of relief, and even felt an indescribable joy. Uncle Zheng was originally in the house. When he heard the commotion outside, he frowned and walked out to take a look. He was also stunned on the spot. You're still alive? Uncle Zheng did not hide his surprise and asked directly. Su Zimo had a calm expression. I'm indeed tired from the journey. I slept soundly. How could I have died? When he saw that Su Zimo did not seem to be faking it, Uncle Zheng was stunned instead. Right then, Night Spirit walked out from behind Su Zimo. Thereafter Nianqi appeared. Finally, the Golden Lion walked out as well. The group of four was safe and sound. There was no sign of injury at all. How was that possible? Uncle Zheng was confused. Late last night, he clearly sensed that the two imperial advisors of Great Xia and Great Shang had entered Su Zimo's room. Furthermore, the two of them had specially set up a spirit consciousness barrier. Could it be that something had happened that caused the two imperial advisors to not make a move? Uncle Zheng was prepared to make a move and asked the two imperial advisors what happened in that room last night. Right then, a tragic cry sounded from the rooms of the princes of Great Shang and Great Xia. Immediately after, an even more shrill cry rang out. It was as if the owner of the voice had received a great shock, and the voice was filled with endless fear. Uncle Zheng's expression changed. He did not have time to think about why Su Zimo was still alive. In a flash, he rushed towards the rooms of the two princes. The old man's movement technique was extremely fast, and did not look like he was in his twilight years. Yulan followed hurriedly as well. Smiling faintly, Su Zimo strolled towards the room in a leisurely manner. Bang! Uncle Zheng knocked open the door and rushed in. When he focused his gaze, he could not help but gasp and take half a step back instinctively. Uncle Zheng, what's wrong? Yulan welcomed him, and asked hurriedly when she saw that something was amiss with Uncle Zheng's expression. She then glanced into the room. This glance also gave her a fright, and the blood drained from her face. The room was filled with an extremely strong stench of blood, and a thick aura of death that was nauseating. There were 2 corpses lying on the 2 beds facing the door. There was a pool of blood beneath them that had already dyed the bed red, and was almost dry. It was clear that they had been dead for a long time. Although the 2 corpses had their backs facing the door, Uncle Zheng and Yulan could recognize them from their backs. The 2 corpses were the imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia. The 2 Dharma Daojun were dead. Who did it? Why was it so quiet? Why was there no sound at all? The 2 of them had snuck into Su Zimo's room last night. How did they die here? Countless questions surged in their minds. Uncle Zheng and Yulan's minds were in a mess. The death of the 2 imperial advisors sent chills down Uncle Zheng's spine as well. This meant that he was also in immense danger and could die at any moment. Uncle Zheng was an imperial advisor of a dynasty and a Dharma characteristic expert after all. He merely took a few deep breaths and calmed down before entering the room. Yulan suppressed her disgust and followed him in. Uncle Zheng looked around and did not find any clues. There were no signs of a fight either. Why don't come over? Inside the huge bed, the Prince of Great Xia curled up in a corner with a terrified expression. His body trembled as he looked at Uncle Zheng and the others with a trembling voice. On the other bed, the Prince of Great Shang was not in a much better state. Just now, the 2 tragic cries were unsurprisingly from the 2 princes. When the 2 of them woke up, they saw the 2 imperial advisors that they relied on as corpses lying beside them, staring at them with a pair of dead fish eyes. Who could bear it? Although the 2 of them were Jining Jinjuan, they were mentally deranged from the sudden shock. Uncle Zheng came to the bed and could not help but frown when he smelled the stench of feces and urine. The 2 princes were so scared that they peed their pants. They no longer had their former glory as they huddled in a corner, trembling like rats with nowhere to run. Uncle Zheng clenched his fists slightly and flipped the corpses of the 2 imperial advisors over. Both of them had terrified expressions, and their protruding eyes were filled with immense fear. Even though he was prepared, his heart skipped a beat. It was truly hard to imagine how frightened the 2 Dharma Daojun were before they died for them to reveal such expressions. Chapter 1147. How could this be? Yulan frowned and could not help but ask. I don't know either. Uncle Zheng shook his head and looked at the 2 princes who were still in shock in the corner. Perhaps they're the only ones who know the answer. I don't know anything. The Prince of Great Xia's voice was still trembling. Uncle Zheng's gaze was sharp as he hollered. Your Highness, calm down. If you don't say anything, and the 2 imperial advisors die for no reason, we might be the ones to die tomorrow. Leave this place. The Prince of Great Shang seemed to have grasped onto a life-saving straw as he said hurriedly. That's right. Leave Qian Heaven City and you guys. I don't want to revive my dynasty anymore. With that said, the Prince of Great Shang scrambled towards the door. The Prince of Great Xia reacted as well, and followed closely behind. Just as the 2 princes reached the door, Su Zimo walked in with a gentle expression and asked with a smile, Your Highnesses, where do you want to go? The expressions of the 2 princes changed, and their bodies trembled instinctively. In their eyes, the green-robed cultivator's smile was like that of a fiend celestial from hell. We want to go back. The Prince of Great Xia had a fearful expression and pleaded with a hint of pleading in his voice. Su Zimo said, Don't. Didn't we agree yesterday that we're going to tour Qian Heaven City together today? The 2 princes were so scared that they were about to cry. How could they be in the mood to tour Qian Heaven City? Both of them knew that they were the ones who asked the 2 imperial advisors to assassinate Su Zimo. But now, the 2 imperial advisors were dead, but Su Zimo was safe and sound. This matter could not be clearer. The smiling, cultured and scholarly cultivator before them was a fiend celestial. Now that the fiend celestial was standing at the door and inviting the 2 of them to travel together, the 2 of them wanted to cry but no tears came out. Su Zimo's gaze shifted to the 2 corpses in the room, and he sighed gently. What a pity that the 2 imperial advisors died just like that. Uncle Zheng and Yulan's gazes were fixed on Su Zimo. However, the two of them could not read any information from Su Zimo's face. The only thing that was suspicious was that this person appeared too calm. However, it was too arbitrary and illogical to conclude that the death of the two imperial advisors was related to this person, based on his calm expression. One had to know that the two imperial advisors were in the Dharma characteristic realm. As for Su Zimo and the others, they were all at the void reversion realm. There was a difference of a major cultivation realm between them. How was it possible to kill two Dharma characteristic Dao Lords silently? Your Highness! Uncle Zheng's attention fell on the two princes again. He asked in a deep voice, "Did the two state preceptors go out last night?" "Yes." The two nodded obediently. "Where did he go?" Uncle Zheng asked. The two princes looked hesitant. They stole a glance at Su Zimo, not daring to say anything. Uncle Zheng narrowed his eyes and asked in a low voice, "Did she go to Su Zimo's room?" "I don't know." The Prince of Great Xia shook his head hurriedly. "I fell asleep last night, and didn't know anything. The moment I woke up, I saw that the state preceptors were dead." "Me too." The Prince of Great Shang added hurriedly as well. "Why did they go to my room?" Su Zimo looked at the two princes and asked with a fake smile. "The two state preceptors can't be thinking of killing me, right?" "And no." The two princes denied hurriedly. Su Zimo nodded and said casually, "That's good. Most people who want to kill me will die tragically." The speaker did not mean it, but the listener took it seriously. Although Su Zimo said it casually, the two princes were scared out of their wits. Their faces were pale, and they felt their legs go limp, almost kneeling on the ground. Yulan's heart skipped a beat as well. That was what Su Zimo said to her when she reminded him of the impending calamity last night. It was almost the exact same thing. To think that the two state preceptors would die here in the wee hours of the morning. Could this matter truly have nothing to do with him? "I'll head out first. You guys deal with it. I still have to walk around the city later." Su Zimo had just turned around when he paused in his tracks and glanced sideways. "Your Highnesses, you won't sneak away if you want to travel with me, right?" "Definitely not." The two princes replied hurriedly. "That's good." Su Zimo smiled in satisfaction and turned to leave. By the time Su Zimo's figure disappeared completely, the two princes could no longer hold on and fell to the ground limply. Unknowingly, they were already drenched in sweat. "It's him. It must be him." The prince of the Great Xia dynasty trembled slightly as he mumbled repeatedly, "Who is it?" Yulan could not help but ask, "You mean to say that Brother Su was the one who killed the two state preceptors?" The Prince of Great Shang nodded repeatedly as well. "That's right, it's that demon." Instinctively, Yulan looked at Uncle Zheng. The words of the two princes were truly ridiculous. However, she still wanted to hear Uncle Zheng's speculation. "My first thought was Su Zimo as well," Uncle Zheng said in a deep voice. "However, there's no way they were the ones who did this." "What do you mean?" Yulan asked. Uncle Zheng pointed to the fatal wounds on the heads of the two state preceptors. 2 wounds that killed them in a single strike. This means that the two of them did not resist at all. In other words, the combat strength of this murderer is superior to the two state preceptors. Yulan nodded. "That's right. Even if Su Zimo and the others have the strength to kill the Dharma Daojun across major cultivation realms, it's impossible for them to kill the Dharma Daojun in a single strike. That's only one of the reasons," Uncle Zheng said. Looking at the 2 wounds, it's clear that they weren't man-made or left behind by any weapon. As he said that, Uncle Zheng placed his palm on the head of one of the state preceptors and said in a deep voice, "This should be the claw of some fiend demon. There's still a wisp of demonic chi on it." As for Su Zimo's group of 4, only the lion is a demon. However, his strength is not at that realm. Furthermore, the lion's claw is completely different from this wound. Yulan nodded. This was almost ironclad evidence. However, she did not expect that there was a terrifying existence among Su Zimo's group of 4 that could even hide from the demon-revealing mirror. It was impossible for Uncle Zheng to see through Night Spirit's facade. Yulan looked at the 2 princes and said, "Did you guys hear that? This can't be done by Brother Su. It's him." The Prince of Great Xia seemed to be possessed, and the fear in his eyes had yet to dissipate as he said repeatedly, "It must be him. His smile and gaze are telling me that he was the one who killed the state preceptor." Ice. Yulan sighed. After this shock, the two of them were no longer in their right minds. Now that the two princes were reduced to such a state, they might have to live in fear every day. It was even more painful than killing them. The two princes were indeed scared out of their wits. However, their guesses were very close to the truth. They were not as calm and rational as Uncle Zheng and Yulan, who could deduce many conclusions based on some clues. They only had one-track minds. Two state preceptors went to kill Su Zimo. The state preceptors were dead, but Su Zimo was still alive. This was done by Su Zimo. Chapter 1148. No matter who the true culprit was, Uncle Zheng and Yulan felt a sense of oppression when the two Dharma Daojun died beside them. The North Region Dao meet had yet to begin. For the next few days, Uncle Zheng and Yulan did not dare to rest or relax, afraid that they would be assassinated silently by the fiend demon hidden in the dark. If the two of them were already in such a state, it was even worse for the two princes. After a few days, the two princes were tormented by the fear in their hearts, and were on the verge of breaking down. They thinned rapidly and looked dispirited. Sometimes, the two princes would even be delirious and mutter things like "it must be him" repeatedly. The only one who was no different from usual was Su Zimo's group of four. Sometimes even Yulan admired the four of them. On the day the two imperial advisors died, she told Su Zimo about Uncle Zheng's speculation. Furthermore, she told Su Zimo and the others that there was a powerful fiend demon hidden in Qian Heaven City, and told them to be careful. In the end, Su Zimo and the others did not care at all, as though they did not know what fear was. It was unknown if this person was truly fearless, or if he was a newborn calf that had never experienced life and death. Yulan had not been idle for the past few days either. In Qian Heaven City, she had heard a lot about the North Region Dao meet. In this generation, the cultivation civilization was at its peak, and could almost compare to the ancient era. There were many paragons and monster incarnates. Many paragons were gathered at the North Region Dao meet this time round. Many paragons were even as famous as Dao being Wushuang, one of the upper sects. Dao being 100 Ghost of Dark Ghost sect, had cultivated a secret skill that no one in Dark Ghost sect had managed to cultivate for 1,000 years. His combat strength was heaven-defying, and he had suppressed countless people of the same cultivation realm. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had fought countless battles, and was defeated less than 10 times. Dao being Blazing Son of Blaze Columbus Valley, was also infamous for his ferocity, and was known as the #1 fire controller of the North Region. In terms of comprehension of the Dao of Fire, he was unprecedented, and was comparable to the ancient sages. Dao being Zimu of Heavenly Piercing Sword sect, was a genius of the Dao of the Sword. He was extremely famous in the North Region. It was said that a mighty figure of the Middle Continent's sword sect fancied his potential, and wanted to take him in as a disciple, but he rejected him. Taoist Zimu was known as one of the twin swords of the Northern Region. The Seven Kills sect, and the Mystic Firmament Divine Cult of the Upper Sects both had outstanding geniuses. Of course, there were also some sects that were weaker among the 10 upper sects of the North Region. For example, the Dragon Tiger sect had previously participated in the Battle of the Four Great Dynasties, causing the sect's vitality to be greatly damaged. Apart from the 10 upper sects, the 4 major cultivation clans were not to be underestimated either. For example, Daoist Huan Guang of the Duga clan was a genius of the Sword Dao. His illusory Sword Dao was both real and illusory. In the same rank, no one could see through his Sword Dao. Daoist Illusory Light was the other of the Northern Region's twin swords, Dao being Zimu and Dao being Huan Guang. These two Sword Dao geniuses were extremely infamous in the North Region, and were almost invincible. In this North Region Dao meet, the 2 3-foot-long blades would probably have to fight it out. Of course, among these geniuses, the most famous was Daoist Wushuang of the Yuan clan. There were also some geniuses who wanted to challenge Daoist Wushuang's position. Apart from the sparring between void reversions, There were also many clashes between Dharma Daojun. There would definitely be a fierce battle at the North Region Dao meet. However, no one realized that there were 4 inconspicuous people in Qian Heaven City who were prepared to stir up a torrential wave at the North Region Dao meet. For the past few days, apart from the first day when Su Zimo went out for a spin, he had been staying in the inn to recuperate. Yulan wanted to make use of this opportunity to befriend as many paragons as possible and establish connections with some sects and factions to prepare for her revival of her dynasty. However, Su Zimo did not have that many plans. He only needed to confirm 2 things before coming to Qiantian City. Firstly, where was Yuan Wushuang? Secondly, would Xuanyu Daren come? These 2 pieces of information could be obtained within a day. For the past few days, Yuan Wushuang had yet to appear in Su Zimo, and the others did not make any moves either. However, they had already received definite news that Yuan Wushuang would definitely appear at the North Region Dao meet. As for Xuanyu Daren, he should not be coming this time round. It was said that Glass Palace only sent a void reversion this time round to compete with Yuan Wushuang for the position of the number 1 Dao being of the North Region. As the time approached, the Golden Lion became increasingly nervous. He had been separated from Cacao for 9 years. In fact, he did not even know if Cacao was still alive. He looked forward to their reunion. However, he was worried that something would happen in between. He was worried that Su Zimo, Night Spirit and Nian Qi would be in danger because they stood up for him. This was the North Region Dao meet. It was one of the largest events in the cultivation world of the North Region. Even the overlord of Wild Lion Ridge would not dare to lead 10 million fiend demons here, let alone the 4 of them. Void reversions were not the only ones at this Dao meet. There were also many Dharma Daojun. How could they handle it? The Golden Lion had no doubts about Night Spirit's combat strength. However, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. If they were surrounded, they would most likely be doomed. More and more cultivators gathered in Qian Heaven City, and it was getting livelier. Over the past few days, news spread from time to time. The appearance of any paragon would cause quite a stir. This day, the North Region Dao meet officially began. Su Zimo tidied his green robes and walked out of the room with Night Spirit, Nian Qi and the Golden Lion. They bumped into Yulan and the others who were approaching. "Brother Su, you're finally willing to come out." Yulan smiled. Uncle Zheng nodded at Su Zimo as a form of greeting. The 2 princes hid behind Yulan and Uncle Zheng, not daring to look up at Su Zimo. Su Zimo could no longer be bothered with the 2 of them. The North Region Dao meet was held in the center of the city. In the middle of Qian Heaven City, there was a gigantic protruding stone platform. At the North Region Dao meet, the fights between cultivators were carried out on this stone platform. Around the stone platform, there were nearly 20 stone pillars standing tall. The stone pillars were extremely spacious and could accommodate at least a few hundred people. There were some chairs on them, and there were many spirit fruits and fragrant teas on the tea table beside them. Only the top sects and factions of the North Region were qualified to go up on the stone pillars. Looking down from above, it could be said to be a condescending view of the world. As for cultivators of small sects and factions, or itinerant cultivators, they could only squeeze on the ground. By the time Su Zimo and the others arrived, the roofs of the restaurants near the stone platform were already filled with people on both sides of the street. Looking at the cultivators on the stone pillars who were eating spirit fruits, drinking fragrant tea and chatting happily, Yulan's eyes were filled with envy. These are all paragons of major sects and factions. If we can befriend them, there's a high chance we can even unify the North Region, let alone rebuild Great Yu. Yulan said softly. Su Zimo smiled and asked instead, "What have you gained in the past few days?" Yulan's expression darkened as she shook her head. These paragons are insufferably arrogant. Who would be willing to help without benefits? Pausing for a moment, she continued. However, it doesn't matter. If I can meet Dao being Wushuang, I believe that I'll definitely be able to move him. As long as he's willing to help, everything will be done. Chapter 1149. Look, Dao Being Wind Flame is here. Dao Being Wind Flame, the paragon of this generation's glass palace. His combat strength is only second to Dao Being Glass back then. At the mention of Taoist glaze, the expressions of many cultivators became somewhat emotional. Unknowingly, 10 years have passed since the calamity of the title. Someone sighed softly. 10 years ago, Su Zimo fought against many titular disciples in the Dao inheritance ground and established his Dao heart. In that battle, 8 titular disciples died, and it was known as the calamity of the title. Taoist glaze had perished there. Suddenly, a cultivator said, "If Araki Takashi appears, the title of the number 1 Dao being of the North region won't belong to Dao Being Wushuang, right?" The Witch Gu calamity happened in the territory of the 4 dynasties. Not many people witnessed Su Zimo's 2 attacks in the capital of Great Zhou and Misty Peak. It had only been a year, and the entire North region did not know that he had returned. A cultivator at the side sneered. Everyone, Araki Takashi was crippled by a half-martial ancestor 10 years ago. Even if he reconstructs his body, how much combat strength can he have in the past? Another cultivator said in a deep voice, Araki Takashi has offended too many factions. It's fine if he continues to remain silent. However, if he dares to appear, countless enemies will come knocking on his door. Yulan was delighted when she heard the discussions around her. Although these paragons would not help her restore her empire, as long as they could get rid of Araki Takashi, they would be able to remove the greatest obstacle in her path to restoring her empire. Brother Su, did you hear that? Yulan rolled her eyes at Su Zimo and said proudly, Araki Takashi is not invincible. He's already at the end of his road. As long as I release the news of his return, countless paragons will naturally attack and suppress him. Su Zimo smiled indifferently and shook his head. It's useless. They're just a bunch of clay chickens and dogs. Those words sounded natural from his mouth. However, to Yulan, it sounded too arrogant. Who would dare to say that the paragons of the North region were clay chickens and dogs? Who had the qualifications to do so? Yulan frowned slightly as her impression of Su Zimo plummeted once more. Uncle Zheng, who was at the side, couldn't help but sneer. How arrogant. Why don't you give it a try in the void reversion battle later on? Let everyone see what methods you have. Not interested. Su Zimo shook his head. He was here for Dao Being Wushuang. He could not be bothered with sparring between void reversions and Dao reversions. They were not worthy of his attention. Look at how scared you are. The mockery in Uncle Zheng's eyes intensified. Don't worry, this Dao meet is mainly for sparring. Unless there's a deep grudge, cultivators will not fight with their lives on the line. Su Zimo smiled and did not argue. In that short period of time, Dao Being Wind Flame had already landed on the stone pillar, with an indifferent expression. He did not even look at the many cultivators beneath him. He only had a single goal for coming here, to defeat Dao Being Wushuang. Glass Palace was the only immortal sect in the North region. The title of the number 1 Dao Being of the North region had to belong to a Glass Palace cultivator. Although Dao Being Wind Flame was alone, he occupied a stone pillar. Furthermore, no cultivator had any objections. Even the Dharma Daojun, who was present, had to give him face. At that moment, almost all the paragons of the various major sects and factions were gathered. Many cultivators of the Yuan clan had already arrived as well. Yuan Wushuang was the only one who did not appear. None of the cultivators present complained or were displeased. That was because this person had a noble status, and it was only right for him to arrive later. After a while, a figure appeared in the distant horizon. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived above Qian Heaven City. This person was burly and wore bronze armor, with a blood-red cape fluttering behind him. Beneath him was a scarlet gold lion that emitted a powerful aura. The moment this person descended, the commotion in the crowd quietened down consciously. It was as though no one dared to speak loudly for fear of offending this paragon. Dao Being Wushuang. After Dao Being Wushuang appeared, Dao Being Wind Flame, who was initially resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened them with a rainbow glass glint in his eyes. At the same time, Dao Being Wushuang looked at Dao Being Wind Flame as well. The gazes of the two paragons collided in midair like divine weapons, causing sparks to fly. Instantly, the atmosphere turned incomparably solemn. The void between the two paragons was filled with a strong killing intent. Neither of them noticed that in the dense crowd on the street, there was a group of people staring at them with ice-cold expressions. "Is that him?" Su Zimo glanced sideways and asked the Golden Lion. The Golden Lion nodded heavily, and its eyes shone with a ferocious glint as it gritted its teeth. "It's him. I'll recognize him, even if he turns into ashes." "That's the cacao below?" Su Zimo's gaze landed on Yuan Wushuang's mount. The lion was scarlet gold without a single strand of impure fur, and looked incomparably divine. "Yes." The Golden Lion gulped with a worried expression. "First, if we fight, don't hurt the cacao." "Yes," Su Zimo nodded. At that moment, the attention of the crowd was focused on the two paragons, Dao being Wushuang and Dao being Wind Flame. Nobody heard their conversation. Dao being Wushuang's cultivation seems to have improved significantly. Don't worry, Dao being Wind Flame inherited Glass Palace, and is definitely not to be trifled with. The cultivators discussed fervently. Yuan Wushuang surveyed his surroundings and declared, "Sorry for the long wait, everyone. I just had some insights and my cultivation improved. That's why I'm late." A commotion broke out in the crowd when they heard that. Dao being Wushuang was already at the perfected void reversion realm previously. Now that his cultivation has improved, doesn't that mean he's at the half-step Dharma characteristic realm? Who can match him among the same cultivation realm? Dao being Wind Flame is under immense pressure now. Dao being Wushuang is exerting pressure on Dao being Wind Flame. A cultivator could tell what was going on and said, although Dao being Wushuang's words seem like an explanation, they are actually meant for Dao being Wind Flame. At that moment, the fight between the two paragons had already begun. Everyone was watching. Yulan looked at the armored man riding a lion in midair, and could not help but lament. "That's a true paragon. That's the bearing that a paragon should have." As she said that, she looked at Su Zimo. She wanted to tell Su Zimo that paragons did not rely on their words. They could attract everyone's attention the moment they appeared. When she looked at Su Zimo, she realized that the latter was pushing through the crowd and walking forward. "Brother Su, where are you going?" Yulan was stunned and asked hurriedly. "To settle scores with someone," Su Zimo replied without turning back. Night Spirit, Nian Qi and the Golden Lion followed behind him with an aggressive aura and unfriendly expressions. Yulan asked instinctively, "Who are you looking for?" "Yuan Wushuang." Su Zimo's voice sounded. Yulan was stunned as she looked at the departing figure. Her impression that was gradually becoming clearer turned blurry once more. Chapter 1150. In midair, Yuan Wushuang and Dao being Wind Flame faced off in a tense atmosphere. Now that 3 people and a beast had barged into the middle of the battlefield, they attracted countless gazes. Even Yuan Wushuang and Dao being Wind Flame turned to look. The 3 people and beast walked over slowly. The leader was dressed in green robes and had delicate features. Behind him was a black-robed man with a cold expression and a golden-haired girl. At the back, a golden lion limped in. The 3 of them and the beast did not appear to be anything special. The only thing special about them was that their eyes were filled with coldness and murderous intent. Who were the 3 of them? What were they trying to do by standing out at this moment? At that moment, some cultivators in the crowd had already recognized Su Zimo, and their expressions changed starkly. The pure gold lion that Yuan Wushuang was sitting on shuddered, and looked at the golden lion with gentleness and worry. Suddenly the golden lion shouted, "Cacao, I'm here to save you." "It's useless." The pure gold lion shook its head with a sorrowful expression and spoke in human language. "Lion, go back. Where did this demon beast come from? How dare you be so arrogant at the North Region Dao meet?" A cultivator of the Yuan clan had already stood out and shouted, prepared to attack and kill the golden lion on the spot. "I'll handle this matter." Yuan Wushuang raised his hand slightly and shifted his gaze to the golden lion. He smiled. "So, it's you, Fufufu. How dare you? Have you forgotten what I told you before?" Yuan Wushuang's tone was calm, but there was a hint of malevolence in his smile. I've said that if you dare to look for me again, I'll shatter every single bone in your body bit by bit. Yuan Wuxuang grinned, and his tone was filled with killing intent. His attention was completely focused on the golden lion, and almost did not see Su Zimo and the other two. Or rather, even if he did not care. Crazy. He's truly crazy. Uncle Zheng shook his head. The four of them are void reversions, and they want to challenge Dao Being Wuxuang? This time, Yulan did not speak. Her eyes were fixed on Su Zimo's face, as if she wanted to see something from his face. Yuan Wuxuang. At this moment, Su Zimo spoke slowly. As soon as this name was mentioned, it caused a commotion. Yuan Wuxuang was now the #1 Taoist in the North region, and his ferocious reputation was illustrious. Anyone of the same cultivation level who saw him would have to respectfully address him as Taoist Wuxuang. Who dared to call him by his name? It was only now that Yuan Wuxuang's gaze turned towards Su Zimo and the others. She sighed softly. It's been many years since anyone has been so rude to me. Little lion, the helper you found is really rude. All the cultivators present could hear the killing intent in Yuan Wuxuang's tone. Many cultivators looked at Su Zimo and the others as if they were looking at a few dead people. Of course, there were also some cultivators who looked grim and bewildered as they looked at Su Zimo in disbelief. They seemed to have thought of something as their bodies trembled slightly. Oh, Su Zimo said indifferently. What a coincidence. There aren't many people who have dared to be so rude to me all these years. That was the truth. In the Dao inheritance ground, all the cultivators who dared to attack him had already turned into cold corpses. Yuan Wuxuang, I'm here to settle 2 scores with you. Su Zimo pointed at the pure gold lion in midair. Firstly, you shouldn't have snatched that lion to be your mount. Secondly, you shouldn't have shattered his leg. Su Zimo pointed at the golden lion again. Ha 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 ha. Yuan Wuxuang reared his head in laughter, as though he had heard the funniest thing in the world. In that case, you're here to settle scores with me? The paragons of the other upper sects shook their heads when they heard that, feeling that it was ridiculous. A cultivator of the Yuan clan stood out and said coldly, You're not worthy of challenging Dao Being Wuxuang. Take this. The void reversion could not hold it in any longer, and leaped down from the stone pillar. He withdrew a saber from his storage bag, and slashed down viciously at Su Zimo's head with the power of heaven and earth. 5 dermic patterns burst forth from the saber. A perfect Dao Being dermic weapon. Before the saber descended, it burst forth with a powerful sharpness, as though it could destroy everything in front of it. Yulan's expression changed slightly. The fact that a random cultivator of the Yuan clan possessed such combat strength was proof of the strength of the 4 gentry clans. The other paragons nodded secretly as well. Coupled with dermic powers, blood chi and the aura that descended from the skies, the power of that slash was released to its limits, and was not to be underestimated. Yuan Wuxuang watched this scene calmly, and had no intention of making a move at all. Su Zimo stood on the spot motionlessly. Even though he was enveloped by the saber aura, his expression did not change at all. His eyes were deep like an ancient well without any fluctuations. It's over. That person has been scared silly. He has to pay the price for being arrogant. Someone sneered. All of a sudden, Su Zimo opened his mouth and spat out a single word. Get lost. His voice was thunderous. The discussion in the crowd had just started, but it was suddenly suppressed by this loud shout, and silence was restored once again. The cultivators who were slightly closer to him were caught off guard and jumped in fright. Many cultivators felt their ears buzz and temporarily lost their hearing. They could no longer hear anything. The crowd was stunned and looked at the battlefield in a daze. Everyone found it hard to imagine that this roar actually came from the mouth of a cultivator. The void reversion of the Yuan clan was still in midair when he was suddenly struck by the sound domain. As though he was struck by lightning, his body shuddered and his gaze froze. His mind went blank and he lost consciousness, falling from midair like a meteor. The saber aura in his hand dissipated. The light on the saber dissipated as well. Bang! The void reversion fell heavily onto the stone platform and lay motionless. He had already fainted and was unconscious. Su Zimo had used the power of Thunderclap Kill for that roar. Although Qinglian's true body was nourished by the primordial divine spring, her bloodline was still not strong. If it was the true bodies of dragons, that roar alone would not have caused the void reversion to faint. Instead, his essence spirit would have been shattered, and he would have died on the spot. Even so, that move was shocking enough. The initially restless crowd quietened down instantly. Who would dare to underestimate someone who could knock out a void reversion with a single roar? Who are you? Yuan Wushuang narrowed his eyes and asked slowly. Araki Takashi establishes a Tao and imparts martial arts to all living beings. Right then, a cultivator stood up slowly and glared at Su Zimo, saying slowly, Tao being Araki Takashi, you're finally out of seclusion. Psst, Tao being Araki Takashi. Those 4 words seemed to have a magical power that caused the entire Qian Heaven City to fall silent. Yulan's mouth was agape, and she felt a boom in her mind with a blank expression. How could that be? Su Zimo, he was Araki Takashi? Uncle Zheng was dumbfounded as well, and could not snap out of his daze for a moment. It's him. The Prince of Great Xia seemed to have gone mad as he shouted with a terrified expression. I knew it. He must have killed the Imperial Advisor. Chapter 1151. When Yulan found out that the green-robed cultivator accompanying her along the way was Tao being Araki Takashi, many things seemed to have an explanation. Tao being Araki Takashi, the peerless paragon who once roamed the North region and suppressed countless paragons, obtaining the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking and personally burying 8 titular disciples. The monster incarnate of history that caused many super sects to be wary of, and even caused a half-martial ancestor to attack. The number 1 Tao being of Tianhuang mainland, who caused the world to tremble the moment he established his Tao heart, and wanted to impart martial arts to all living beings, and change their fates. Everyone present knew that Su Zimo was severely injured by a half-martial ancestor expert, and narrowly escaped death. His combat strength was greatly reduced, and he might even have fallen from his pedestal, and lost his brilliance. However, at that moment, when he appeared, many cultivators recalled the legends of Araki Takashi's miracles. Nobody could ignore his past. Araki Takashi, just this Taoist name alone had a suffocating and irresistible force of deterrence. Yulan looked around. Some were stunned, some were wary, some were terrified and some were excited. The cultivators at the Tao meet had different expressions, but everyone remained silent. There was no sound in the world. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. If the appearance of Tao being wind flame and Yuan Wushuang was the center of attention, she was already shocked. The appearance of Su Zimo pushed the shock in her heart to its limits. She had once said that true paragons should be the center of attention. But now she realized that she was wrong. True paragons could intimidate everything. Tao being Araki Takashi, the weight of those 4 words caused all the cultivators to feel an omnipresent pressure. In a daze, countless doubts flashed through Yulan's mind. Why did desolate Marshall not attack her the past few days when they traveled together? Was he wary of Uncle Zheng? Or was it because his combat strength had decreased, and he was not confident? Or was there some other reason? What did the deaths of the 2 imperial advisors have to do with Araki Takashi? Was it really like what the 2 princes said, that the 2 state teachers were killed by Araki Takashi? On the stone platform, Yuan Wushuang gradually regained his senses. After all, he was the number 1 Taoist in the North region, and a genius that was hard to come by in 1,000 years. He was invincible, and had never tasted defeat. He had a strong temperament, so how could he be intimidated by a Taoist name? Araki Takashi, I didn't expect it to be you. Yuan Wushuang's expression was calm as he sighed lightly. What a pity, what a pity. When your physical body is destroyed, and the green lotus of creation shatters, your era has already passed. When he said this, many cultivators felt their hearts lighten. That's right. Taoist Araki Takashi is no longer the monster of the past. What do I have to be afraid of? Araki Takashi had once relied on his physical body and bloodline power the most. Now that he had reconstructed his body and lost the divine phoenix bone, what other trump cards did he have? Araki Takashi, you came at the right time. More than 100 years ago, in the Battle of the Great Qian Ruins, you killed my sect's paragon for the vermilion fruit. I'm here to settle that score with you. On the stone pillar, Dao Being 100 Ghost of Dark Ghost Sect stood up slowly and glared at Su Zimo with a dark gaze, saying sinisterly, one of the upper sects, Dao Being Blazing Son of Blaze Columbus Valley, suddenly burned with flames as he said in a deep voice, you killed many disciples of my sect in the Battle of the Great Qian Ruins. It's time for you to pay with your life. One of the two swords of the North region, Dao Being Zimu of Heavenly Piercing Sword Sect, had a sharp gaze as he suddenly said, you killed my sect's paragon in the Great Qian Ruins. I've long wanted to test my 3-foot green sword on you. He was merely saying that casually. If this was 10 years ago, which of the paragons present would have dared to step forward and challenge Su Zimo? But now, paragons stood out one after another, glaring at Su Zimo with unfriendly expressions and murderous auras, as they spouted all sorts of reasons. In reality, the paragons of Heavenly Piercing Sword Sect did not die in the hands of Su Zimo. They were killed by Duge Jian. However, at that moment Su Zimo was the one to blame for everything. Yuan Wushuang rode on the pure gold lion and smiled indifferently with a mocking look in his eyes. There was no need for him to make a move. Dao Being Araki Takashi was already too busy to fend for himself. Dao Being Wind Flame stood up slowly as well and said sternly, Araki Takashi, you truly shouldn't have come. You want to attack as well? Su Zimo asked with a smile. Dao Being Glass died in your hands. If I kill you, I'll be the titular disciple of Glass Palace for this generation. Dao Being Wind Flame's voice was filled with killing intent. The crowd was furious. The situation changed rapidly, and Su Zimo became the target of everyone. In the crowd, Uncle Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. Princess, you can rest assured now, Uncle Zheng whispered. This Araki Takashi is arrogant and conceited. He doesn't know how to judge the situation. You don't have to appear, and these paragons will kill him. Yes, Yulan responded absent-mindedly. She should be happy that the greatest obstacle in her path to restoring her dynasty was about to be removed. However, for some reason, she did not feel the joy she had imagined when she saw this. There were many Dharma Daojun at the Dao meet. However, none of them stood out at that moment. Many Dao lords merely communicated with their spirit consciousnesses in secret and watched coldly from the sidelines. They knew very well that many conjoint body mighty figures attacked the Dragon Burial Valley 10 years ago. Dao Being Araki Takashi had a Mahayana patriarch backing him. Furthermore, this patriarch had declared back then that he would not interfere in a fight between those of the same cultivation realm. However, if an expert of a sect wanted to cross a major cultivation realm and kill Araki Takashi again, this patriarch would take revenge. All we have to do is watch from the sidelines. Dao Lord Mu Yu was a Dharma characteristic expert of the Duanmu family. The Dharma characteristic expert of the Ouyang aristocratic family, by Ling Daojun, smiled indifferently. That's right. With so many void reversion paragons gathered here, Araki Takashi is definitely going to die today. In everyone's opinion, there were peerless paragons such as Yuan Wushuang and Dao Being Wind Flame at the void reversion realm. Even if it was a series of consecutive battles, it would be enough to exhaust Su Zimo to death. On the stone platform, against the killing intent of many void reversion paragons, Su Zimo had a calm expression and said slowly, I'm here today to look for Yuan Wushuang. It's best if unrelated people don't join in the fun. He was truly reminding them out of goodwill. He only had two motives for coming to the North Region Dao meet. One was Yuan Wushuang, and the other was Xuanyu Daoran of Glass Palace. However, some people disapproved of Su Zimo's reminder. Araki Takashi, this is the North Region Dao meet. You're not allowed to be arrogant. A void reversion stood out and strode towards Su Zimo. His eyes seemed to conjure the sun, moon and stars with a shocking aura. It's Dao Being Xing Yun of Stellar Luna Sect. I heard that Dao Being Xing Yun is only slightly more than 100 years old and has already cultivated to the void reversion realm at such a young age. His future is limitless. Some cultivators whispered. On the stone platform, Su Zimo did not move at all, and did not even look at Dao Bing Xingyun. Dao Bing Xingyun felt that he was being looked down upon, and was enraged. Without testing, he released Stellar Lunasec's secret skill. He wanted to release his killing move, without giving Su Zimo a chance to react. A one-hit kill. The secret skill had already formed in front of Dao Bing Xingyun. An ancient gigantic star spun slowly, and crushed over with a powerful aura. Right then Nianqi turned around slowly. Chapter 1152. The gigantic star emitted a savage aura, and arrived with a bang. Nianqi strode forward without using any dermic arts. He merely gripped his fists tightly, and his blood qi burst forth with streams of golden light. He clenched his fist and punched out. Against the star, Nianqi's fist was as insignificant as a speck of dust. However, it was precisely this speck of dust that collided with this enormous star, that caused a deafening explosion, that shook the heavens, and the earth to explode. Boom! A gigantic shockwave spread out in all directions. Nianqi did not retreat at all, and his golden hair fluttered. Crack! 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 Suddenly, a series of horrifying cracking sounds could be heard on the battlefield. Under the gazes of countless people, cracks appeared on the surface of the huge planet, rapidly expanding and spreading. They filled the entire star. Bang! Immediately after, the star exploded and countless rocks formed from dermic powers flew everywhere, filling the air with dust. Blood drained from Dao Bing Xingyun's face upon receiving such a severe injury. He shuddered and was sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Who do you think you are to attack my young master? Nianqi looked at Dao Bing Xingyun, who could not get up from the ground, with a dispirited expression and sneered, hollering softly. It was only at this moment that everyone's attention landed on the golden-haired girl. Prior to this, Su Zimo's appearance and Araki Takashi's name shocked everyone. Almost no one paid attention to the two people and beast beside him. It was only at this moment that everyone realized that this girl was not to be trifled with either. What surprised everyone the most was that such a beautiful and powerful girl seemed to be merely Araki Takashi's maidservant. Yulan was dumbfounded. This petite girl, who had been traveling with them all the way and looked harmless to humans and animals, had actually erupted with such terrifying power. The paragon of Stellar Lunasect could not even withstand a single move from Nianqi. Nianqi had the bloodline of the Protoss flowing in his body. Apart from some of the top paragons and monster incarnates, Nianqi could sweep through almost everyone of the same cultivation realm. Not bad, not bad. Yuan Wushuang's expression was calm as he said with a smile. Little lion, the two helpers you found are quite strong. Yuan, you broke my leg. It's my fault for not being good enough. I admit it. The golden lion gritted its teeth and said, as long as you return cacao to me, we will leave now. Sure. Yuan Wushuang nodded with mockery in his eyes. Kneel down and beg me. Ha 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 ha. A fiend demon actually came to our north region, Dao Meet, to negotiate with the number one Dao being of the north region. What a joke. A burst of laughter came from the crowd. Night Spirit's gaze turned cold. Nianqi also glared at him. The golden lion's expression turned menacing, and there was a hint of struggle in its eyes. After a moment of silence, he finally lowered his head and limped out. Lion, don't. The reddish-gold lion couldn't bear to see this happen. However, the moment she spoke, Yuan Wushuang sealed her words with a single thought. The reddish-gold lion had already signed a blood oath with Yuan Wushuang. Yuan Wushuang could kill the reddish-gold lion with a single thought. When he saw the golden lion's actions, the smile in Yuan Wushuang's eyes intensified. You might have misunderstood. What I meant was that not only you, all four of you, have to kneel down and beg me. The laughter in the crowd gradually quietened down. Everyone felt their hearts skip a beat. It was as though a storm was about to descend. It was nothing much to make a demon beast kneel. However, just now, Yuan Wushuang meant for Dao being Araki Takashi to kneel before him as well. 10 years ago, even the Dharma Daojun did not dare to make such a request in front of Dao being Araki Takashi, let alone void reversions. Very good. Ever since I became famous, no one has dared to speak to me like that. Su Zimo looked at Yuan Wuxuang with a cold gaze and nodded. You're the first. And I. Suddenly, Su Zimo opened his mouth and let out a Sanskrit sound. At the same time, an enormous golden palm appeared by Yuan Wuxuang's side, and it clawed fiercely at his body. Charge! Yuan Wuxuang channeled his consciousness and had the reddish-gold lion carry him towards Su Zimo. Since the reddish-gold lion had signed a blood oath with him, there was no way it would betray him. However, at that moment, the reddish-gold lion stood motionlessly on the spot despite the danger of violating its blood oath, and its bloodline reversing, causing its body to explode and die. Beast, how dare you! Yuan Wuxuang was enraged. Ma. Right then the second Sanskrit sound descended. Demon subduing seal. OM. The third Sanskrit sound. Fiend suppression seal. 3 dermic seals, and 3 Sanskrit sounds reverberated through the world. All of them enveloped Yuan Wuxuang and released a suffocating attack. Initially, Yuan Wuxuang wanted to use his consciousness to kill the reddish-gold lion. However, under such an attack, the slightest distraction would cause him to perish. The offensive power of the 3 Daming True Sutra dermic seals, coupled with the Daming mantra, had already reached its limits. Yuan Wuxuang did not dare to be careless as he leaped up and conjured hand seals with both hands, hollering, Een Wind God Slash. A series of sharp saber beams formed from dermic powers burst forth from his body. They were bedazzling and sliced open the 3 golden palms that enveloped him. Break! Yuan Wuxuang roared, and withdrew a gigantic axe from his storage bag, slashing down viciously. Boom! The golden Buddha palm shattered into specks of golden light. Just as Yuan Wuxuang was about to make a move, Su Zimo's attack descended once more like a torrential storm, not giving him any chance to catch his breath. Qi! An incomparably blazing sword qi burst forth, and filled the world with a white blur. Stars appeared in the firmaments in a chaotic manner. The killing intent of the heavens shifted the stars. Heaven-slaying sword qi. This was the most terrifying killing move among Su Zimo's many dermic arts. Given his current cultivation, he could release 3 sword qi consecutively. However, Su Zimo did not release all of them at once. The killing power of the 3 sword qi was way too terrifying. He was worried that he would kill Yuan Wuxuang directly. Yuan Wuxuang had signed a blood oath with the reddish-gold lion. If he was killed directly, the reddish-gold lion's essence spirit would be severely injured as well. Furthermore, even if he killed Yuan Wuxuang directly, he might not be able to free the golden lion from its mental demons. After the heaven-slaying sword qi appeared, all the cultivators were shocked. Even many Dharma Daojun were moved, let alone the void reversions present, with wary looks in their eyes. The sharpness of the sword qi even made them feel threatened. What a terrifying sword qi! To think that Araki Takashi's dermic arts would be so terrifying. Suddenly, a cultivator sneered. All of you think that Araki Takashi's combat strength has decreased greatly after losing his physical body. However, there's something you might not know. What? Someone could not help but ask. The cultivator said sternly. In the Battle of the Dao Inheritance Ground back then, Araki Takashi had demon blood flowing in his veins, and the divine phoenix bone in his body. His physique and bloodline were suppressed. 10 years ago, this cultivator had entered the Dao Inheritance Ground and witnessed the battles with his own eyes. What does that mean? The cultivators at the side still did not understand. The cultivator said slowly, this means that Araki Takashi did not use his body or bloodline to kill the 8 titular disciples back then. You guys think that his physique and bloodline are strong and invincible in melee combat. However, you don't know that Araki Takashi's dermic arts are also strong enough to look down on his peers and destroy everything. Chapter 1153. Yuan Wuxuang swung the gigantic axe in his hands, and had just charged forward when his vision was shrouded by a bedazzling light. An extremely sharp edge was coming straight at his face. Before the edge truly descended, he already felt as though his body was about to be torn into 2. Yuan Wuxuang reared his head, and roared as the blood chi in his body burst forth completely. His bloodline rumbled and spewed out. Although the strength of his blood chi had not reached the level of tsunami blood, it was only a step away, and could be considered top-notch. Yuan Wushuang gripped his gigantic axe tightly, and released his blood chi. Dermic power surged within his body and his black hair danced. Narrowing his eyes, he slashed viciously towards the incoming sword chi. The heaven-slaying sword chi had already forced out all his strength. Right then, Su Zimo slapped his storage bag and removed a dark gray mountain peak, throwing it towards Yuan Wushuang. It was the ancient unique treasure, the Mystic Magnet Mountain. When the Mystic Magnet Mountain was first taken out, it was only the size of a palm, and could be supported with a single palm. However, as Su Zimo injected dermic powers, the Mystic Magnet Mountain expanded rapidly against the wind and turned into a mountain in the blink of an eye. The larger the Mystic Magnet Mountain, the stronger the magnetic power it emitted. Given Su Zimo's current cultivation, he could raise the Mystic Magnet Mountain to 100 feet tall if he channeled it with all his might. Although it was far from a true mountain peak, the sudden descent of the 100 feet tall mountain peak was shocking enough as well. Yuan Wushuang wielded his gigantic axe, and could have initially slashed against the heaven-slaying sword chi. However, due to the appearance of the Mystic Magnet Mountain, it released a powerful magnetic power that pulled his gigantic axe away from its original trajectory. Yuan Wushuang's blood chi was strong, and he could maintain his stability, even with the suction of the Mystic Magnet Mountain. However, the gigantic axe in his hand moved a small distance, and just happened to cross paths with the heaven-slaying sword chi that slashed over. Although it seemed like a millimeter difference, it could determine the life and death of this battle. Yuan Wushuang's expression changed starkly. In a flash, he made the most correct choice. He abandoned the gigantic axe in his hands. This giant axe was his natal celestial weapon. In his hands, it could unleash an extremely powerful destructive force. However, under the envelopment of the Mystic Magnet Mountain, his destiny dermic weapon became a burden. He did not have the time to block the heaven-slaying sword chi. With a thought from Yuan Wushuang, the gigantic axe transformed into a stream of light and was stuffed back into his storage pouch. At the same time, he formed hand seals with his left hand, while his right hand took out a few talismans from his storage bag and tore them apart. Wung, wung, wung. Layers of defensive barriers were formed in front of him, wanting to block the sharpness of the heaven-slaying sword chi. Puff, puff, puff. However, these talismans were like a layer of window paper in front of the heaven-slaying sword chi, being pierced through one after another. 6 trigram Dharma mirror. Taking advantage of this delay, Yuan Wushuang's spell had already been condensed. A scarlet gold circular mirror appeared in his palm. Mysterious patterns were etched on it, and it spun continuously, emitting a blazing glow. These successive responses displayed Yuan Wushuang's extremely powerful combat strength, keen combat talent, and brilliant combat skills. He was indeed worthy of being called the #1 Taoist in the northern region. However, Yuan Wushuang's rise was too short. At the very most, it had only been 10 years. What happened 10 years ago? The 8 titular disciples, the strongest void reversions in Tianhuang mainland, were all killed by Su Zimo in the Dao inheritance ground. The biggest reason why Yuan Wushuang could rise was because Dao Being Glass died in the hands of Su Zimo. In other words, if Dao Being Glass was still around, Yuan Wushuang might not have been able to stand out. But after 10 years, Su Zimo, who had once killed 8 titular disciples in the Dao inheritance ground, had become even stronger, and the killing power of the heaven-slaying sword chi was even stronger. Clang! The heaven-slaying sword chi broke through 3 defensive barriers and struck the center of the 6 trigram Dharma mirror. Crack! 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 Accompanied by a series of cracking sounds, cracks appeared on the 6 trigram Dharma mirror and filled the entire mirror in the blink of an eye. Yuan Wushuang's expression changed. The killing power of the sword chi was too strong, and it broke through 3 of his defensive talismans and a defensive dermic art. However, the remnant sharpness did not stop. There was no need for more. 2 consecutive sword chi would be enough to kill him here. Yuan Wushuang felt a tremendous pressure that suffocated him. It was as though all his methods were useless against Araki Takashi. Araki Takashi had reconstructed his body, and the power of his physique and bloodline was definitely his weakness. Yuan Wushuang wanted to close the distance right away and fight Su Zimo in melee combat. However, he could not get close at all. Poof! The sword chi pierced through the 6-trigram Dharma mirror. Yuan Wushuang wanted to retreat and dodge, but it was too late. Poof! Blood flashed. Yuan Wushuang's palm was pierced by the heaven-slaying sword chi. The killing power contained in the sword chi spread rapidly along the wound, destroying all life in the palm. On the surface, it looked like there was only a bloody hole in Yuan Wushuang's palm. However, in the blink of an eye, the meridians and blood vessels in the palm ruptured, and the life within was destroyed by the heaven-slaying sword chi. The palm was crippled. The sword chi did not stop, and pierced towards Yuan Wushuang's chest. Clang! The sword chi landed on the armor on his body, and emitted a burst of fire, before finally dissipating. The cultivators were dumbfounded. Throughout the entire process, everyone was so nervous that they even forgot to breathe. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they saw the sword chi dissipate. Even bystanders felt such pressure against the heaven-slaying sword chi, let alone Yuan Wushuang, who was enveloped by the sword chi. A few drops of sweat had already appeared on his forehead. The armor on his body was also a Khanate Dao being dermic weapon. However, the remnant sword chi still left a clear white mark on his armor. Just now, he would have been defeated and severely injured by the sword chi, if not for the protection of the armor. Yuan Wushuang had a lingering fear after escaping the calamity, and relaxed slightly. However, he did not expect that Su Zimo would not give him a chance to catch his breath. 6-trigram dermic mirror. The moment the sword chi dissipated, Su Zimo charged forward and extended his arm, pointing at Yuan Wushuang and hollering, "Kill! Thunderclap kill!" A sound domain secret skill was released. If it was a normal battle, given Yuan Wushuang's blood chi and physique, he might not be affected by Thunderclap kill. However, at that moment, he was at his most relaxed state, and was suddenly struck by Thunderclap kill. His entire body shuddered and his mind went blank. The moment Thunderclap kill descended, a gigantic lightning pillar descended above his head. It curved and coiled with lightning, as it struck Yuan Wushuang's head. Snap! Thunder exploded. The fusion of the Purple Thunder Manual and Green Thunder Manual, to form the Great Void Spirit Refinement section, was one of the dermic arts. Fury of Thunder. Although Yuan Wushuang's armor could defend against the sharpness of dermic weapons, it could not defend against the impact of Fury of Thunder. Thunderclap kill and Fury of Thunder descended at the same time, and Yuan Wushuang was struck silly. Smoke billowed from his body and his hair curled. His gaze was blank and he was motionless. Chapter 1154. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had already arrived beside Yuan Wushuang. With a wave of his hand, he captured her essence spirit and gathered it in his palm. Victory was decided. The crowd was in an uproar. From the moment Su Zimo attacked to the end of the battle, only more than 10 breaths had passed. No one had expected that this battle would end in such a short time. The number 1 perfected being of the North region could not resist at all against Su Zimo, and her essence spirit was captured. Su Zimo's series of attacks were the top dermic arts of the immortal and Buddhist Daos. It was already rare for Yuan Wushuang to be able to break free from the impact of the 3 damning dermic seals and defend against the sharpness of the heaven-slaying sword chi. If it was any other paragon, they might not even be able to defend against the 3 damning dermic seals. Yulan's heart skipped a beat when she saw that with a conflicted expression. Probably no one could understand what she was feeling right now. The reason why she came this time round was to invite Yuan Wushuang to suppress Araki Takashi. However, she did not expect that in less than 10 breaths, Yuan Wushuang's essence spirit would be captured by Araki Takashi, and her life would be out of her control. That was truly ridiculous. What was even more ridiculous was that the Dao being Araki Takashi, that she wanted to suppress was Su Zimo, who was with her. Uncle Zheng sighed faintly and said softly, "Princess, it seems like your hunchback then was right. This person is indeed not simple." Yulan smiled bitterly without saying anything. Her first impression of Su Zimo, when she saw him, was that he was special and not simple. That was the reason why she invited him over to befriend him. However, she had not expected him to be so special. The entire battle ended too quickly. Even mini Dharma Daojun could not react in time, let alone the void reversions present. "Araki Takashi, stop!" A Dharma Daojun of the Yuan clan stood up and frowned, saying in a deep voice, "Araki Takashi, this is the North Region Dao meet. Everyone is just exchanging pointers and not fighting to the death." "Not bad." In the Duanmu family, Dao Lord Muyu nodded and said loudly, "Araki Takashi, the outcome has been decided. Let him go." "Can't fight to the death?" Su Zimo sneered and said indifferently, "I came to the North Region Dao meet to settle scores with him. Do you think I'll let him go just because you said so?" Presently, Yuan Wushuang's origin spirit was in Su Zimo's palm. Su Zimo could annihilate Yuan Wushuang with a single thought. Even if the Dharma Daojun present had the intention to make a move to save him, he was also wary of taking action, for fear of breaking the vases. "Araki Takashi, let's make a deal." Yuan Wushuang judged the situation. When he saw that he could not escape, he said in a deep voice, "If you kill me, the essence spirit of the Scarlet Gold Lion will be severely injured as well. How about I break the blood oath with her, and you release me?" The Golden Lion's heart skipped a beat, and he hesitated. If he could exchange for Cacao safety, he would be willing to exchange his life for Yuan Wushuang's release, let alone Yuan Wushuang. Although his leg was shattered by Yuan Wushuang, as long as Cacao was fine, this suffering was nothing. However, now that Su Zimo was in control of the situation, he could not say anything. He merely looked at the Scarlet Gold Lion, with a worried expression. "All right." As though he could sense the Golden Lion's intentions, Su Zimo pondered for a moment before nodding. "Break the blood oath and I'll spare your life." "That won't do. You have to swear a Dao oath. What if you go back on your word?" Yuan Wushuang was still worried. "I said that I'll spare your life, so I won't kill you." Su Zimo's expression turned cold as he exerted strength in his palm and squeezed Yuan Wushuang's essence spirit, saying coldly, "Don't push your luck." "All right." Yuan Wushuang could sense the killing intent in Su Zimo's heart and did not dare to make any more requests. He chanted a mental cultivation technique, and a drop of soul blood floated out of his consciousness. It was in the shape of a lion, and emitted a faint demonic chi as it flew towards the Scarlet Gold Lion. The Scarlet Gold Lion had an excited expression and hurried forward. When the drop of soul blood returned to her body shuddered and the invisible shackles that shrouded her were suddenly released. Delighted, the Scarlet Gold Lion reared her head and roared, sprinting towards the Golden Lion. After 9 years, they were finally reunited. Their foreheads were pressed tightly together. The two lions were motionless and silent, merely looking at each other affectionately with tears in their eyes. Many cultivators were moved when they saw that. Although these were only two demonic beasts, at this moment, many cultivators could feel the joy and emotion of this reunion. Everything had a spirit and emotions. Demons were the same. Nianqi smiled. Even the night spirit's eyes flashed with an imperceptible gentleness. "Araki Takashi, why aren't you letting go of me?" Yuan Wushuang hollered. Su Zimo released his grip. Yuan Wushuang's essence spirit transformed into a streak of light and entered his glabella, returning to his consciousness to regain control of his body. Endless indignance and resentment surged in his heart. Prior to this, he was the #1 Dao being of the North region, and his reputation had already reached its peak. No one of the same cultivation realm could compare to him. However, in just more than 10 breaths, all of his glory and past was shattered by this green-robed cultivator before him. "I can't let this matter rest just like that." Yuan Wushuang lowered his head slightly and glanced at Su Zimo, who was standing not far away from him. Suddenly, a bold thought popped into his mind. Previously, he wanted to think of ways to engage in melee combat with Su Zimo, but to no avail. But now, the two of them were less than an arm apart. Wasn't this a godsend opportunity? If he were to suddenly attack and kill Dao being Araki Takashi here, it would be nothing even if he was defeated just now. Although this method was dishonorable, it would be worth it as long as he could kill Dao being Araki Takashi. His reputation would not decrease. Instead, it would rise once more. The moment that thought flashed through his mind, it could no longer be suppressed and grew wildly. Yuan Wushuang felt his heart thumping wildly. Steady. Yuan Wushuang took a deep breath of air and tried his best to stabilize his emotions. He did not look at Su Zimo, afraid that he would alert the latter and fail at the last step. Kill. All of a sudden, without any warning, Yuan Wushuang raised his head and his eyes shone with a cold glint. With a roar, he lunged toward Su Zimo. However, the moment he raised his head, his heart skipped a beat. Unknowingly, Su Zimo had already turned around and was looking at him with a fake smile. That pair of deep eyes seemed to have seen through all his thoughts long ago. Not good. Yuan Wushuang was alarmed. He was prepared. Right then, a demonic glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. His pupils were pitch black, as though they were emitting a strange demonic power. Yuan Wushuang was stunned. When he exchanged glances with those demonic eyes, his mind went into a daze. His movement technique, speed, and hand movements all slowed down. However, Yuan Wushuang snapped back to his senses before long. Visual technique. His heart skipped a beat, and he revealed an opening. Su Zimo's visual technique took advantage of it and affected his mind. Yuan Wushuang's heart gradually sank. Although he snapped back to his senses quickly and was only dazed for a moment, it was enough for him to do anything against an opponent of Araki Takashi's level. There was already a palm on the top of his head. It was Araki Takashi's palm. Chapter 1155. The change happened even faster. It was just a momentary lapse of concentration, and the battle was over. Yuan Wushuang stood in front of Dao, being Araki Takashi motionlessly with a pale face. Although he was trying his best to remain calm, one could still see the panic in his eyes. Dao being Araki Takashi's palm was on Yuan Wushuang's head. As long as he exerted strength in his palm, Yuan Wushuang would die without even a chance for his essence spirit to leave his body. How could this be? How did Dao being Wushuang fall into the hands of Dao being Araki Takashi? Many cultivators were still in a daze. They did not see what had happened in that instant. A cultivator was speechless. Earlier on, Yuan Wushuang suddenly attacked Araki Takashi, but the cultivator paused and frowned slightly with a hint of confusion in his eyes. What's wrong? Speak. Someone could not wait any longer and urged. The cultivator could only continue. However, I don't know what happened. At this critical moment, Yuan Wushuang's expression faltered for a moment, and his movement technique paused for a moment. That momentary pause allowed Dao being Araki Takashi to seize the opportunity and suppress him first. The crowd was stunned. How long has it been? And the number one Dao being of the North region is suppressed by Araki Takashi again. It seems to have been even shorter this time round. Could Yuan Wushuang be so weak that he can't even last a single breath against Araki Takashi? The eyes of the cultivators were filled with disbelief. Uncle Zhang, what happened just now? Yulan could not help but ask. She had been paying attention to the two of them on the battlefield the entire time, but could not understand what happened the moment they exchanged blows. It was as though Yuan Wushuang had suddenly lost his soul and was captured. Uncle Zheng said in a deep voice, "It's a visual technique." Yuan Wushuang revealed his fear first, and his mind was shaken. A flaw appeared, and he was affected by Araki Takashi's visual technique. That's why he ended up like this. This Araki Takashi is even scarier than we thought. Uncle Zheng sighed. Uncle Zheng was not wrong. What Su Zimo released was the heavenly fiend eye of the Tao Heart Fiend Seed Sutra, and could affect the minds of cultivators. In all fairness, it was already very rare for Yuan Wushuang to be able to instantly break free from the power of the heavenly devil eye and wake up. One had to know that Su Zimo's demonic arts were extremely powerful. The reason was that his memories contained many cultivation experiences and comprehensions of a demonic sect half-martial ancestor. Araki Takashi, what are you doing? Dharma Daojun of the Yuan family had just sat down when he suddenly stood up and shouted with a calm face. Su Zimo shook his head expressionlessly. You shouldn't be asking me this question. You should be asking him what he wants to do. Araki Takashi, you can't kill me. Yuan Wushuang did not dare to act rashly and grit his teeth. You promised me earlier on. Your Dao being Araki Takashi, you can't go back on your words. But I already spared you once earlier on. You were the one who didn't cherish the opportunity, Su Zimo said faintly. Fear surged through Yuan Wushuang's heart. Su Zimo was right. Just now, their transaction was completed. He removed the blood oath, and Su Zimo spared his life. However, he was the one who asked for the current situation. Araki Takashi, you can't kill me. Yuan Wushuang took a deep breath and said slowly. If you dare to kill me, I can guarantee that you won't be able to leave Qian Heaven City. Oh. Su Zimo's gaze intensified as he closed in and glared at Yuan Wushuang, asking coldly, Are you threatening me? He exerted strength in his palm and squeezed the top of Yuan Wushuang's head. The tremendous force caused the latter's head to cave in slightly. The skull let out a terrifying sound, as though it would be crushed by Su Zimo the next moment. An intense pain assaulted him, and Yuan Wushuang was sweating profusely, almost fainting. Just as he was about to break down, Su Zimo released his palm, and the suffocating feeling of death suddenly vanished. Yuan Wushuang panted heavily with lingering fear. He looked at the delicate cultivator before him, as though he was looking at a devil. Killing you would be letting you off too easily. Su Zimo's palm slid down and patted Yuan Wushuang's cheek, saying coldly, There's still a score that I haven't settled with you. Yuan Wushuang's heart sank. Su Zimo continued, That lion is my sworn brother. You broke his leg. What do you think we should do? What do you want? Yuan Wushuang clenched his fists and asked instead. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Su Zimo said slowly, Since you broke his leg, you'll have to return his leg. How dare you? The Yuan clan's Dharma Daojun was enraged and shouted, Araki Takashi, although you're a human, you're willing to travel with fiend demons and become sworn brothers. Now you want to injure a paragon of the human race for the sake of a fiend demon? Dao Lord Muyu frowned slightly as well and said sternly, Araki Takashi, don't go overboard. Suddenly, Su Zimo recalled Demonist Ji's evaluation of the righteous immortal sex. If these people wanted to do bad things or kill people, they would have to find some dignified reasons to cover up their hearts. They were the most hypocritical. Why? You guys want to attack me? Su Zimo sneered and asked instead. The two Dharma Daojun were speechless and had terrible expressions. The current Dao being Araki Takashi was different from the past. He had a Mahayana patriarch backing him. They were wary and did not dare to act rashly, afraid that their clans and sects would suffer the wrath of the Mahayana patriarch. How dare you? Yuan Wushuang glared at Su Zimo and growled fiercely. Su Zimo's palm was still above Yuan Wushuang's head and pitch-black threads spread out from his palm. The black threads coiled around Yuan Wushuang and sealed his dermic powers. Su Zimo was expressionless as he raised his leg and tapped gently on Yuan Wushuang's right leg. Crack! Crack! A series of bone-cracking sounds could be heard in a shuddering manner. The bones in Yuan Wushuang's right leg were shattered by Su Zimo's kick, turning into fingernail-sized fragments that remained in his body. There was no way he could recover from such serious injuries, unless he had the primordial divine spring. Ah! Yuan Wushuang shrieked tragically, and his face turned pale as his body trembled uncontrollably. At that moment, he seemed to have returned to that rainy night 9 years ago, where he saw a lion dragging its mangled hind legs and crawling through the mud bit by bit. All of this seemed to be karma. Suddenly he regretted it. If he had known that the lion had such a relationship with Araki Takashi, he would not have provoked it back then. The golden lion watched everything. The fear he had towards Yuan Wushuang vanished bit by bit. There was a hint of vigor in his eyes once more. Cacao, this is the big brother I mentioned to you before. The golden lion grinned and said in high spirits. Big brother came this time round to help me vent my anger. Cacao had a worried expression. Yuan Wushuang has a noble status, and the Yuan family has a strong foundation and strength. Now that we're surrounded by strong enemies, while it's satisfying for Big Brother to do this, isn't it a little reckless? Reckless. Nianqi shook his head. This isn't over yet. Chapter 1156. It was not only the Yuan clan. Many Dharma Daojun present had terrible expressions. They felt embarrassed that Su Zimo could do whatever he wanted at the North Region Dao meet. Araki Takashi, don't be too arrogant, the Dharma Daojun of Dark Ghost Sect said coldly. This is the North Region Dao meet, and the Dharma Daojun is present. You can't be insolent here. Araki Takashi, let him go. The Dharma Daojun of the Yuan clan hollered. At that moment, Yuan Wushuang lay in front of Su Zimo's feet, looking extremely miserable as he howled. One of his palms was crippled by the heaven-slaying sword qi. Now one of his legs was crippled as well. Unless he could find the primordial divine spring, or cultivate to the conjoint body realm. Otherwise, there was no way he could recover from such severe injuries. His path as a paragon would end here. The cultivators looked at Yuan Wushuang with conflicted expressions and lamented. The former number 1 Dao being of the North region was reduced to such a state because of a demon beast with his dignity trampled all over. Let him go? Su Zimo sneered and suddenly reached out, grabbing Yuan Wushuang's hair and pulling him up from the ground. What else do you want? Yuan Wushuang had already broken down completely, and his voice trembled. Do you remember what you said earlier on? Su Zimo looked at Yuan Wushuang and said slowly. You'll only let go if the 4 of us kneel to you. Am I wrong? Yuan Wushuang's body shuddered. Who gave you the guts to make me kneel? Su Zimo's tone was sinister and murderous. Back when he was still a mortal, he dared to confront perfected Jin Dan, and refused to bend his knees. Right now, he was Dao being Araki Takashi. 10 years ago, he killed 8 titular disciples, and was known as the number 1 Dao being of Tianhuang mainland. He was revered by the world, and no one dared to underestimate him. Even the Dharma Daojun would not dare to say such words, let alone avoid reversion like Yuan Wushuang. In other words, no one of the same cultivation realm could withstand Araki Takashi's kneeling. Since you like making people kneel so much, I'll fulfill your wish. After saying that, Su Zimo suddenly, he extended his leg and kicked Yuan Wushuang's knee. Crack, crack. A tremendous amount of power surged into his knees. Yuan Wushuang's knees was kicked to dust. This was equivalent to both of his legs being crippled. Yuan Wushuang could not hold on, and knelt down with a thud. He Wushuang this kind of physical and mental torture almost caused him to faint. Yuan Wushuang was crippled completely. A thought Zimwang Wushuang mainland s. U.N. Furthermore, Yuan Wushuang asked for it. If he had retreated obediently, during the first transaction between the two of them, he might have been able to save a leg. However, he wanted to kill Su Zimo but was captured by the latter. It was only right for him to die, let alone cripple his legs. Junior Araki Takashi, you've gone too far. Dharma Daojun of the Yuan clan could not hold it in any longer, and even summoned his destiny dermic sword. It shone brightly, and almost could not control itself as it attacked Su Zimo. Araki Takashi, don't be smug, Dao Lord Muyu said coldly. Although we can't attack you, there are thousands of void reversion paragons present. How long can you last if all of them swarm you? Why? Su Zimo sneered. The North Region Dao meat has already fallen to such a state, and you want to attack me shamelessly. Although you're a human, you travel together with fiend demons, and are sworn brothers with them. You're extremely ferocious, and are no different from fiend demons. It's only right for the paragons of the human race to kill fiend demons. Bai Ling Daojuan's words were righteous. It was as though in the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had turned into an unpardonable fiend demon that killed people like flies that was not tolerated by the world. Even the cultivators had a legitimate reason to attack Su Zimo. Waves of soul consciousness rippled from the dozen or so stone pillars in midair. Many Dharma Daojun of the upper sects and clans present were sending voice transmissions to the void reversion paragons of their sects, telling them to prepare to attack. Almost all of the 10 upper sects, for gentry clans, two ancient aristocratic families and many other sects and factions of the North region had a feud with Su Zimo. In the battle at the Great Qian Ruins, most of the geniuses of those sects died in the hands of Su Zimo. Right now, there was no way the Dharma Daojun could watch as Su Zimo did whatever he wanted at the North region Dao meet. If a void reversion were to attack, it would not be considered as crossing a major cultivation realm to target Su Zimo. Even if the Mahayana Patriarch knew about it, he would not be able to say anything. When the Paragons received the order, they glared at Su Zimo and were tempted. Araki Takashi's combat strength was indeed strong. However, they had the advantage in numbers. It was difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. No matter how strong Araki Takashi was, could he defend against the encirclement of a group of paragons? It was just like how, although the sword chi was terrifying, it could only target one or two people. Araki Takashi's dermic powers would be exhausted eventually. Of course, there were some cultivators who retreated secretly and chose to watch from the sidelines. These people had witnessed Su Zimo's methods personally in the Dao inheritance ground. In their opinion, either the Dharma Daojun present would attack, or the 8 titular disciples would revive and join forces to kill Araki Takashi. Otherwise, the void reversions in Qian Heaven City might not be enough. In the crowd, Uncle Zheng whispered, "Araki Takashi is way too sharp. As the saying goes, it's easy to break if you're too hard." To think that he still couldn't understand the logic behind it, after encountering a calamity 10 years ago. Yulan was silent. She could no longer see through this person. "Araki Takashi, you're cruel and tyrannical, calling fiend demons your brother. You only have yourself to blame for today's situation." Dao being 100 Ghosts said coldly, and was the first to stand out. "Araki Takashi, your combat strength is indeed strong," Dao being Zimu said in a deep voice. "In order to respect you, the twin swords of the North region have decided to join forces to fight you." Dao being Blazing Son of Blaze Columbus Valley stood out with a scorching aura and said in a deep voice, "I heard that you know some fire techniques. I'd like to seek your guidance." One after another, paragons stood out. Many void reversions had already received orders and were waiting for an opportunity to strike. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was surrounded by a group of cultivators. A murderous aura filled the air. A battle was about to break out. Night Spirit and Nian Qi turned slightly and protected the Golden Lion and Cacao in their midst, surveying their surroundings with unfriendly expressions. "I think you guys are mistaken about something." Even though he was trapped, Su Zimo's expression was still calm. "The reason why I'm here is mainly for 2 things. The first thing has been resolved. After I'm done with the second thing, I'll leave and won't affect your North region Dao meet." Dao being 100 Ghosts sneered, "Everyone don't believe him." "I'll repeat myself. I'm here for 2 things. I don't want to complicate matters and incur feuds with you guys." Su Zimo said, "Just now I've attacked and haven't killed a single person. That's enough to prove my words." Everyone was stunned. They realized that Su Zimo was right. He did not kill and neither did Nian Qi, the maidservant beside him. Even Yuan Wushuang did not die. Su Zimo changed the topic and said coolly, "However, if you guys insist on killing me, don't blame me for starting a massacre and staining Qian Heaven City with blood." Chapter 1157. At the North region Dao meet, many upper sects, aristocratic families and paragons were gathered, and there were also many Dharma Daojun present. If these factions, paragons and Dharma Daojun, were intimidated by a void reversion at such a grand event, they would definitely become the laughing stock of the cultivation world if word got out. Anyone who could cultivate to the void reversion and Dharma characteristic realm was someone with a firm will. It was difficult for them to be scared off by a few words. In the eyes of the cultivators, it was inevitable that Araki Takashi's combat strength would be greatly reduced after reconstructing his body. Although he had suppressed Yuan Wushuang forcefully earlier on, the dermic arts he released were extremely powerful and expended a lot of energy. How long could he last with such expenditure? They had thousands of void reversions on their side. On Araki Takashi's side, including the two lions, there were only 5 void reversions. It was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. Furthermore, Araki Takashi had once killed 8 titular disciples, and must have countless treasures and secret skills on him. If they killed Araki Takashi, they would have a chance to split those treasures. In reality, the cultivators who had such thoughts had not witnessed the battle in the Dao inheritance ground personally, and their understanding of Araki Takashi was limited to legends. In fact, these paragons even doubted the authenticity of those legends. There were also some cultivators who wanted to take advantage of the situation and fish in troubled waters. After Suzimo said that, some cultivators retreated towards the periphery of the battlefield with grim expressions. They had witnessed the battle between Araki Takashi and many titular disciples before. Without witnessing it personally, it was difficult to imagine the shock that battle brought to them. Even if Araki Takashi's combat strength was greatly reduced after reconstructing his body, and he did not have any helpers by his side, they planned to wait and see for the time being. Hee. Suddenly, a cold laugh sounded in midair. Dao being 100 Ghost's figure swayed, and suddenly, many figures appeared from his body and surrounded the entire stone platform. Those figures looked no different from Dao being 100 Ghost. Even their auras, cultivation realms, expressions and voices were identical. Ghost Parade. Ghost Sect's secret technique. There were extremely few cultivators who could cultivate it successfully, and Dao being 100 Ghost relied on that secret skill to become one of the paragons of the void reversion realm. There was a commotion in the crowd. This was the first time many cultivators had seen such a technique, and they were shocked. To be able to represent the North region in this Dao meet, they naturally had powerful trump cards and were outstanding. Suzimo frowned slightly. This secret technique could not be considered a clone technique. A doppelganger meant that it had inherited some of the original body's combat power, more or less. If the 100 Ghost Daoist could create 100 clones with battle power, his reputation would be far greater than this. This was more like an illusory technique that could pass off as reality. Of course, if this illusion technique was used properly, it was enough to toy with the opponent in the palm of his hand. Uncle Zheng, can you see his real body? Yulan asked softly. Uncle Zheng shook his head and said, I can't tell. Even with my divine perception, I can't sense the difference between these figures. Yulan's heart trembled. If even the Dharma Daojun could not see the flaw in the secret technique, then the others. Araki Takashi. The 100 figures opened their mouths at the same time and buzzed. It was impossible to tell which one was the real body. Just because you didn't kill anyone doesn't mean that you're merciful. Dao being 100 Ghosts said coldly. This proves that you're guilty. That's because you know how to judge the situation. You know very well that the paragons of the North region Dao meet are gathered, and the Dharma Daojun is around. You won't dare to be too brazen. You didn't kill anyone because you didn't dare to. Before Dao being 100 Ghosts could finish, Suzimo swept his gaze and lightning arcs shrouded his body. In a flash, he charged towards a figure. Dao being 100 Ghosts was alarmed. Swoosh. Phantoms appeared one after another, and lunged towards Suzimo with menacing faces and cold killing intent. If other cultivators were faced with the incoming phantoms, they would either defend or dodge, and their speed would definitely be affected. However, Suzimo's speed did not decrease at all. Instead, it increased. Lightning flashed, and almost instantly, he passed through the phantoms and arrived before a figure. He had long seen through that the phantoms were illusions and had no combat strength at all. Naturally, he was fearless. The reason why he could find the only true body among the 100 phantoms was not because of his vision or spirit consciousness, but because of his unfathomable spirit perception. The 100 phantoms were indistinguishable. However, only one of the phantoms had killing intent, and triggered a warning from his spirit perception. Dao being 100 Ghosts' expression changed in shock. He had not expected that the secret skill he relied on would be so weak against Suzimo. Lightning escape was extremely fast. By the time Dao being 100 Ghosts realized that something was amiss and wanted to retreat, it was already too late. Suzimo reached out and spread his fingers. In a flash, he grabbed Dao Being 100 Ghost by the throat and lifted the latter up. The 100 phantoms dissipated. There was only one figure left that was gripped by Su Zimo by the throat and kicked wildly in the air. The crowd was in an uproar. Many cultivators were still trying to figure out which was the true body of Dao Being 100 Ghost. Dao Being 100 Ghost had already fallen into Su Zimo's hands. "You're too noisy," Su Zimo said coldly with an expressionless face. "If you dare to kill me, don't even think about leaving alive." Dao Being 100 Ghost's face was purplish as he glared at Su Zimo and let out a final sound from the depths of his throat. Noisy, Su Zimo exerted strength in his palm and crushed Dao Being 100 Ghost's throat. Lightning flashed and surged into Dao Being 100 Ghost's consciousness, shattering his essence spirit. Dao Being 100 Ghost was dead. When Su Zimo realized that his retreat could not resolve the problem, there was only another way out. "Kill him," the Dharma Daojun of Dark Ghost Sect ordered with a frosty expression. Many cultivators were already tense to begin with. When they heard the order, they exploded and attacked. With the mystic magnet mountain guarding the stone platform, some metal-type dermic weapons were sucked over the moment they pierced over. Many cultivators reacted immediately and either put away their dermic weapons or summoned weapons of other materials. Bang! 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 Dermic arts descended one after another and enveloped the area. At that moment, at least 1,000 void reversions attacked. Dermic powers surged with a terrifying might, almost forming a tsunami of dermic powers that wanted to drown Su Zimo and the others. In the face of such power, Yulan felt her heart skip a beat. Given her cultivation, she would definitely die if she was swept into it. Uncle Zheng protected her hurriedly and retreated outside. The tsunami of dermic powers crushed down with a massive might, as though it wanted to destroy all living beings on the battlefield. Cacao's face was pale. Although she was at the void reversion realm, she had never seen such a terrifying attack. She was way too insignificant in the face of such power. Even if she resisted, she wouldn't be able to cause any ripples in the tsunami. The Golden Lion was someone who had experienced the battle of Myriad Phenomenon City after all. He had seen major scenes and could still maintain his composure. "Cacao, don't worry," the Golden Lion consoled her softly. "Pa!" Su Zimo chanted Sanskrit and conjured hand seals repeatedly. His black hair danced and a shimmering golden barrier condensed on his body. The golden barrier enveloped the Golden Lion, Cacao and Nian Qi. Su Zimo's Dharma characteristic was dignified like an ancient golden Buddha that stood in the raging waves and remained motionless despite the impact of the waves. Immovable foundation seal. Night Spirit's figure had long vanished. Chapter 1158. More than 1,000 dermic arts were blocked by Su Zimo single-handedly. The spectating cultivators were shocked. Su Zimo's essence spirit was nourished by the creation Qinglian, and he cultivated the top cultivation techniques of the immortal Buddhist and Fiend sects. He was comparable to the Dharma Daojun. With the help of the Mingwang prayer beads and the Daming mantra, coupled with the immovable foundation seal, Su Zimo's defense was pushed to its limits. However, the attacks of the group of cultivators did not stop. Rumble! Boom! Thunder rumbled in the firmaments and dark clouds filled the skies, as though they were splashed with ink. Purple lightning flashed through the clouds. Purple thunderstorm! Su Zimo hollered and pointed forward. Beneath the dark clouds, streaks of lightning poured down and intertwined, forming a storm that connected the heavens and earth. Before the attacks of the group of cultivators descended, Su Zimo had already counterattacked. The storm howled and swept into the crowd. Some cultivators who could not dodge in time were swept into the storm and were struck by lightning, letting out tragic cries. Their life force was destroyed by the terrifying lightning. Some cultivators with weak bodies were torn into pieces by the purple thunderstorm, and their essence spirits were destroyed. All the cultivators dodged, and the crowd was in chaos. Araki Takashi died. A sword beam flashed over with a sharp edge and arrived instantly. In the blink of an eye, it had already pierced the back of Su Zimo's head. That slash had already released the killing power of the sword Dao completely. The entire void was about to be torn in half. It was Dao being Zimu, one of the two swords of the North region. Without even looking, Su Zimo closed two fingers on his left hand and formed sword fingers. He circulated his mental cultivation and slashed forward gently. Qi. A blazing sword qi shot out from his fingers. The heaven-slaying sword qi appeared once more. In the face of the heaven-slaying sword qi, Dao being Zimu's sword Dao was like a joke that was destroyed effortlessly. Pust. Dao being Zimu's pupils constricted as he gasped. He had never seen such a terrifying sword qi before. The murderous power contained within this sword qi caused his heart to almost stop beating. Clang! The sword qi clashed with his long sword. Ka-ka-ka. Cracks began to appear on the body of the sword. His destiny dermic weapon was shattered by the sword qi. Puff! Numerous fragments flew over with boundless sharpness and instantly entered Daoist Zimu's body, causing rays of blood to erupt. The distance was too close, and Daoist Zimu couldn't even dodge in time. Daoist Zimu's eyes were wide open. His eyes were already starting to lose focus, and the life force in his body was rapidly fading away. When the sword fragments entered his body, his life force was completely destroyed. Even his primordial spirit couldn't escape. Plop! Daoist Zimu's corpse fell to the ground, and he died in Qian Heaven City. The second heaven-slaying sword qi descended and killed another paragon. Pa! On the stone pillar, Dharma Daojun of Heavenly Piercing Sword Sect was shocked when he saw that. He slammed the table and stood up with endless rage in his eyes. Araki Takashi. He gritted his teeth and spat out two words filled with torrential hatred. The moment Dao being Zimu attacked, another sword cultivator had already arrived in front of Su Zimo. He wielded his sword and shook it gently. Whoosh! Instantly, hundreds of swords materialized in front of him, piercing towards Su Zimo in an illusionary manner. Dao being illusion light, the other sword cultivator of the North region's twin swords. The sword beam was resplendent and bedazzling. Not only could that sword technique confuse a cultivator's spirit consciousness, the sword beam could also restrict a cultivator's vision completely. The sword hummed and affected a cultivator's hearing. The descent of that sword technique almost sealed Su Zimo's five senses. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he closed his eyes. Relying on his spirit perception, he reached out in a flash and grabbed forward. Hundreds of sword shadows dissipated. Dao being Illusion Light's sword was already in Su Zimo's grasp. Dao being Illusion Light was delighted when he saw that. Break! Dao being Illusion Light hollered, and wanted to sever Su Zimo's palm with the sharpness of his sword. However, his expression changed before long. The sword lay silently in Su Zimo's palm without moving at all. In fact, the sharpness of the sword could not even cut through Su Zimo's skin. This, Dao being Illusion Light was stunned. How could that be? After Dao being Araki Takashi reconstructed his body, how could his body withstand the sharpness of a Khanate Dao being dermic weapon? Su Zimo opened his eyes and looked at Dao being Illusion Light with a hint of mockery. Suddenly his palm turned limp and trembled, jerked and tugged. Ah! Dao being Illusion Light exclaimed. Suddenly, he felt a massive twisting power burst forth from the other end of the sword. His palm was torn and blood gushed out. He could no longer grip the hilt of his sword, and it flew out of his hands. Su Zimo had pulled it over. Su Zimo snatched Dao being Illusion Light's sword and tossed it in reverse without hesitation. The two of them were extremely close. The entire process of snatching and tossing the sword was completed in a single breath. Furthermore, Su Zimo's burst of strength was way too great. The sword transformed into a cold beam of light and disappeared in a flash, entering Dao being Illusion Light's glabella. Poof! The sword pierced Dao being Illusion Light's head, and his essence spirit was destroyed on the spot. In almost a single round, Dao being Illusion Light was nailed to death by his own destiny dermic weapon. How ruthless! The cultivators who did not advance and were watching from afar were shocked and speechless. If it was them, they would definitely be wary against so many sects, factions and Dharma Daojun. However, they did not expect Dao being Araki Takashi to be so decisive that he did not even give face to the Dharma Daojun. Fire Snake Coil. Tao being blazing Columbus Valley's Tao being blazing sun conjured hand seals consecutively, and the surrounding temperature rose continuously. A fiery red aura emanated from his hands and condensed into a gigantic fire snake, more than 100 feet long in midair. The fire snake was lifelike and burned with flames. Some cultivators could not dodge in time, and were tainted by the flames on the fire snake. Instantly, they were engulfed by the flames and died. Heavens, how is that a fire snake? That's a fire dragon! The crowd exclaimed. The fire snake that was more than 100 feet long reared its head and flicked its forked tongue. Its entire body was shrouded in flames, and none of the surrounding cultivators dared to approach it. Go and kill him. Tao being blazing sun pointed at Su Zimo. The fire snake seemed to be sentient, and could understand Tao being blazing sun's words. Its eyes shone with a ferocious glint as it charged towards Su Zimo. Su Zimo glanced at the fire snake and sneered. Do you think you're worthy of playing with fire in front of me with that little snake of yours? Su Zimo circulated the Scarlet Flame Heart Sutra and snapped his fingers. Suddenly, a pitch-black flame appeared on his fingertip. Su Zimo flicked his finger. The black flames floated and collided with the fire snake. The flames swayed weakly, as though they could be extinguished at any moment. However, that was the Fiend Tao fire condensed by Su Zimo's fiend cultivation technique. After all, the fire snake was not a true life form. It could not sense the terror of the Fiend Tao fire at all. Looking at the black flames, the fire snake opened its mouth and devoured them. However, the fire snake's body froze in midair before long. Swoosh! Under countless gazes, countless black flames darted out of the fire snake's body. In the blink of an eye, it burned through the snake's body. The scarlet fire snake was reduced to a gigantic snake that burned with black flames. However, it did not dissipate. Instead, it turned around and charged towards Tao being blazing sun. Under the burning of the Fiend Tao fire, the fire snake had already fallen into the Fiend Tao. The flames on its body were even more terrifying, and were no longer under Tao being blazing sun's control. Chapter 1159. Tao being blazing sun's expression changed. The secret skill that he had cultivated for 1,000 years was no match for the black flames in Araki Takeshi's hands. In the blink of an eye, the gigantic snake burning with black flames had already arrived before him. It raised its head and coiled around him. Tao being blazing sun did not have time to think, and channeled his spirit consciousness once more, conjuring hand seals continuously as a ball of scorching flames rose from his body. Flames surged into the skies. Tao being blazing sun's figure almost vanished, and there was only a gigantic fireball left in midair. The black flame snake's body constricted and coiled continuously. The Fiend Tao fire on the gigantic snake collided intensely with the flames of the fireball, and devoured each other. The two types of flames fought. After a momentary stalemate, the Fiend Tao fire gained the upper hand. The flames spat out by the fireball gradually turned black. Before long, a tragic cry sounded from the fireball. Tao being blazing sun's figure appeared once more. He waved his arms in midair and struggled continuously. Black flames burst forth from his body and burned outwards. His eyes, ears, mouth, and nose were all burning with black flames. It was terrifying and horrifying. In just a few breaths, Tao being blazing sun's figure had already disappeared from midair. The void reversion paragon was incinerated into nothingness by the Fiend Tao fire, and his body and spirit were destroyed. Bang! 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 Many dermic arts descended once more and the void trembled. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and two balls of flames burned. At the same time, a scarlet flame and a golden flame appeared beside him. Immortal Tao fire, Buddhist Tao fire. In midair, the Fiend Tao fire that had just incinerated Tao being blazing sun floated back as well. 3 balls of flames surrounded Su Zimo's figure and spun slowly, as though they were 3 eternal lamps that illuminated the world. Scarlet flame revolving lamp. Many dermic arts descended on Su Zimo's body, but they were burned silently by the 3 spinning Tao fires, and turned into nothingness. The crowd was secretly shocked. Although it hadn't been long since the battle started, Su Zimo's consecutive killer moves had killed all the geniuses. Most importantly, their strength couldn't even break through Su Zimo's defense. The crowd became restless, and chaos began to appear. Many cultivators were already thinking of retreating. Right at this moment, another shrill scream came from the crowd. Ah! As soon as the scream rang out, it stopped abruptly. The crowd looked over and saw a paragon of the Duanmu aristocratic family falling from midair. His head was pierced by a sharp weapon, and there was a bloody hole. It was clear that he was not going to survive. Who killed him? The expressions of the crowd changed slightly. Su Zimo was right in front of their gazes. Just now, he didn't even make a move. Who was it that killed this genius? It's that man in black. Some cultivators realized that a black-robed man had just disappeared from Su Zimo's side. So they quickly reminded him. Right at this moment, the cultivator suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Immediately after, many cultivators looked in his direction with fear in their eyes. Unknowingly, a black figure appeared behind the cultivator with an indifferent expression and cold eyes. It was Night Spirit! Exclamation point! Night Spirit extended his finger and poked the back of the cultivator's head gently. Night Spirit's finger was way too sharp and was even more frightening than divine weapons. He did not use any strength, but a bloody hole appeared on the cultivator's head. Actually, more than 10 cultivators had died in the hands of Night Spirit in this short period of time. However, the attention of the crowd was attracted by Su Zimo when the battle broke out, and no one noticed. It was only at this moment that everyone realized it, and could not help but feel chills run down their spines. Compared to Su Zimo, this black-robed cultivator was even more frightening. No one knew when they would be suddenly closed in on, silently and mysteriously killed. Bang! A petite silhouette dashed over and punched out. Golden light filled the air, breaking the spell and killing a heaven's favorite. The paragon's body exploded instantly, and he died on the spot. That petite figure was none other than Nian Qi. Some cultivators summoned dermic weapons made of other materials and slashed them at Nian Qi's head. Without even looking, Nian Qi punched in reverse and punched the incoming dermic weapon heavily, shattering it into pieces. Some cultivators released dermic arts, but Nian Qi released her power of blood qi to take them head-on. The corporeal body of the god race could withstand divine weapons. Protoss bloodlines could suppress all secret skills. Back then, the Protoss were invincible in Myriad Phenomenon City. That was proof of how terrifying Protoss bloodlines were. Nian Qi did not need dermic weapons. She relied on her Protoss body and bloodline to charge into the crowd, and not many people could defend against her strength. That was true divine power. In the blink of an eye, at least 100 void reversions died in the hands of Su Zimo and the others. Many Dharma Daojun on the stone pillars could no longer sit still, and stood up one after another. Araki Takashi deserves to die. The Dharma Daojun of the Yuan clan grit his teeth in hatred. Are we going to let Araki Takashi act so brazenly? The Dharma Daojun of Dark Ghost sect had a cold expression. Dao being 100 Ghost was his proudest disciple. To think that he would be the first to die. This was unacceptable to him, and he wanted nothing more than to tear Su Zimo into pieces. However, Su Zimo had a Mahayana patriarch backing him. Many Dharma Daojun were wary and none of them dared to act rashly. Dao Lord Muyu pondered for a moment, and a cold glint flashed through his eyes. Suddenly he said, "I've got it. We can stop targeting Araki Takashi and kill the others instead." The eyes of the cultivators lit up as though they were enlightened. Bai Ling Daojun nodded. "That's a good plan. If we kill the black-robed man, the golden-haired girl or the 2 lions, Araki Takashi will definitely stop us. He attacked us first, so he can't blame us for retaliating. If we're not careful and accidentally kill him, then he can only blame himself. What are we waiting for? Let's kill those 2 lions first." The Dao Lord of Heavenly Piercing Sword sect soared into the air and transformed into a sword beam that tore through the crowd and charged towards the Golden Lion and Cacao. Both the Golden Lion and Cacao were pure-blooded ferocious beasts, and would not be disadvantaged against the Void Reversion Paragons present. However, against Dharma-characteristic Dao Lords, The difference in their combat strength was way too great. Buzz! A sword beam appeared and slashed down instantly with a chilling killing intent. The Tao of the sword was the most murderous. Sensing danger, the golden lion did not hesitate and shielded Cacao behind him before hurling his dermic weapon. Clang! His long saber was directly cut into two by the long sword that was coming at him. That saber was a dermic weapon he obtained in the ancient battlefield, and was also his destiny dermic weapon. His essence spirit was implicated when his destiny dermic weapon shattered. Exclamation point! The golden lion spat out a mouthful of blood and looked dispirited. However, it refused to retreat and protected Cacao behind it. The sword beam paused for a moment before slashing down once more. All of a sudden, a streak of green light appeared, arriving first despite being launched later. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, it blocked this terrifying and sharp sword light. Clang! The long sword cut through the green light with a crisp sound, and sparks flew in all directions. The green light froze. The Tao Lord of Heavenly Piercing Sword Sect appeared as well. He focused his gaze and his expression changed. Disbelief flashed through his eyes as he exclaimed, "Creation Qinglian. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.